Chapter 254. Clatter, the sky was gloomy, and it suddenly rained, drowning Su Li's cry. When Su Yu heard the word ant, her consciousness that was about to go away seemed to be pulled back by her obsession. She opened her eyes reluctantly and saw the tears on Su Li's face. They mixed with rainwater and dripped down her chin. She suddenly grasped Su Li's hand and moved her lips. No, Su Li trembled all over. She suddenly raised her head and saw Su Yu's half-opened eyes. Hope rose in her heart. She condensed a stream of green starlight and poured it into Su Yu's body. But she forgot that she was also seriously injured. Blood immediately rushed up her throat. She reluctantly swallowed a mouthful of heart blood. With a strange flush on her face, she hurriedly said, "Aunt, I know. I have always known it. I am timid. I didn't dare to recognize you at the first time. You must be safe. I will take you away now." When the green starlight entered her body, Su Yu breathed heavily. When she had a little strength in her body, she immediately stopped Su Li from transmitting the green starlight. She stared at Su Li with gentle eyes, as if she wanted to remember this face forever. "Silly girl, run away." "No, Aunt, you will be fine." While talking, Ling Xian and the elder approached. The rain fell around them, but was bounced off by an invisible force. It was still clean. However, Su Li was covered with mud at this moment. Su Li clenched her teeth and held Su Yu. Her broken body couldn't bear the heavy punishment. She groaned, and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. But it was quickly washed away by the cold rain. She seemed to see nothing and just wanted to hold Su Yu and leave. But Ling Xian wouldn't let Su Li get what she wanted. She looked at Su Li playfully. Su Li picked up Su Yu from the mud and stood up straight. Then she kicked Su Li and Su Yu away immediately. Their blood splashed in the sky. They hit the wall and fell bricks and stones. If there was no accident, both of them should be dead. The elder frowned and reminded her, "Holy girl, this trip is against the harmony of nature. Just kill them. There is no need to torture them." Ling Xian lowered her head and obediently admitted her mistake. "I was rude." The old man looked relaxed and nodded slightly, but he did not see the joy in Ling Xian's eyes. If Su Li didn't die in pain, how could she vent the hatred she had accumulated in the past few months? "It's getting late. After I take the demoness head, I'll return to see the sect master." The old man walked toward the broken wall and said, "According to what you said, as long as this woman dies, the demonic spell will naturally be undone. After the cult master wakes up, he will surely understand the Holy Virgin's painstaking efforts." Ling Xian's eyes lit up. She nodded and smiled. "You are right." Boom! The elder flicked his sleeves and raised a gust of wind, which lifted all the scattered bricks and stones. The situation made the elder slightly moved. When the two people were kicked away by Ling Xian, it was Su Li who was holding Su Yu, but now it was reversed. Su Yu had lost her breath, but she still stood in front of Su Li and used her last strength to keep Su Li alive. Such a sentimental person, was it really as the holy maiden said, a demoness? He was suspicious, and his palm fell on the head of Su Li, who was in a coma, for a long time. Ling Xian walked closer and saw this scene. Her face immediately became gloomy. Su Li was still alive. "Elder, now is not the time to be soft-hearted. Since you don't want to do it, let me do it myself." Ling Xian stepped forward and slammed her palm without hesitation. The old man's pupils contracted. At this moment he finally felt that he was cheated. But at this moment, the third elder's anxious voice came from afar. "Fourth elder, stop Ling Xian." "What?" The old man stood in front of Su Li and immediately stopped Ling Xian. Bang! Ling Xian was shocked by the counterforce, and her pretty face turned pale. She stepped back several steps and looked extremely gloomy. "Fourth elder, you are so indecisive. You will only ruin the great plan of the hierarch." The old man snorted. "I now suspect that the Holy Virgin has evil intentions. Please don't act rashly. Wait for the third elder to come and decide." Ling Xian looked gloomy. She stared at Su Li's pale face. Suddenly, she thought of something and smiled calmly again. Such an injury had hurt her foundation. Even if Su Li escaped tonight, She would only become a useless person and couldn't live for more than 10 days. There was no need for her to be anxious. In the blink of an eye, the figure of the third elder was close. He was so anxious that he even forgot to separate the rain. The fourth elder was shocked, and his attention was subconsciously attracted by the third elder. This distraction suddenly made a flaw appear behind him. Suddenly, a flash of sword light appeared and stabbed the back of the fourth elder with great momentum. "Watch out, fourth elder!" Such an unexpected change made it too late for the third elder to rescue him. He could only shout, "Puff!" In the eyes of Ling Xian, a huge wound of more than 10 feet appeared on the back of the fourth elder. He flew out directly and fell to the ground. A man in black with a bamboo had appeared in front of Su Li out of thin air. "Junior sister apprentice." Su Yu's body was already cold. The eyes of the man in black were full of grief and indignation, but he still had a little sense. He put the healing elixir into the mouth of Su Li, who was still alive, and then stood up. His eyes were full of killing intent. He was Wen Tingshan, who just arrived in Yunjing City today and heard the noise. "You all deserve to die." "Third elder, help me!" Ling Xian screamed. The third elder hurriedly settled the fourth elder. He was full of anger but had no time to vent. He had to fight with Wen Tingshan. For a time, the rain was flying, and the shock waves smashed everything around into powder. Su Li and Ling Xian were blown out and fell directly on the bluestone street. The rain was pouring, and there was no pedestrian on the street. Ling Xian glanced at the two people who were fighting in the distance, and then saw Su Li, who was still in a coma. The fear in her eyes was immediately replaced by madness. Without any nonsense, she directly slapped Su Li's glabella. "Stop! Stop!" Wen Tingshan and the third elder saw this scene at the same time, and their expressions changed greatly. They shouted loudly, but Ling Xian turned a deaf ear to them. She didn't stop at all, and the smile on her face widened crazily. "Su Li!" At the moment when the palm was about to hit Su Li's face, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were full of coldness and brutality. Ling Xian's scalp was numb and immediately slapped her palm faster. Crack! The slender palm covered with mud pinched Ling Xian's wrist. The wound on it had turned white and no blood flowed out. "You still have strength?" Ling Xian was stunned. She struggled hard, but felt that the strength was increasing rapidly. Then she heard a crisp sound. Crack! "Ah!" Su Li loosened her hand and stood up slowly. Ling Xian held her arm and retreated in horror. She shouted in panic, "Third elder, help!" The third elder frowned slightly and was about to step forward to stop her. But there was a long whistle behind him. Sword lights attacked him desperately, and he couldn't get away. Seeing this scene, Ling Xian was completely panicked. She stepped back for a few steps. She suddenly thought of something and said fiercely, "Su Li, you can't kill me. If I die, the master will definitely not let you go." Su Li was expressionless and slightly stopped. Ling Xian was slightly happy and said, "Su Li, if you still have some sense, let me go. I will explain it clearly in front of the master and accept my punishment." Anyway, as long as she successfully went back alive and exhausted Su Li to death, her plan would be successful. She would definitely be punished, but it didn't matter. As long as it was a long time, it was enough to erase everything. The master would finally choose her. It could only be her. "It's ridiculous. Are you still dreaming at this time?" Su Li's voice was hoarse like a ghost. She turned into a shadow and pinched Ling Xian's neck. Ling Xian was so scared that her face turned pale. "Please stop." Ling Li appeared at the corner of the street. He was wet all over, and his cold face was full of anxiety. The first scene he saw was that Su Li killed Ling Xian. He subconsciously stopped her. The voice was so familiar that it was almost engraved in his soul. Su Li's body trembled violently. Her pale face flashed a look of mockery. She pinched Ling Xian's throat with one hand. Crack! The crisp sound came to everyone's ears. The light in Ling Xian's eyes gradually disappeared, and she fell at Su Li's feet. God didn't let her go after all. "Xian!" Ling Li was still in red. He flashed like a gust of wind from behind Su Li and held Ling Xian, who fell to the ground. He forcibly passed some genuine energy to Ling Xian and saved her last breath. Ling Xian struggled to open her eyes. When she saw Ling Li's eyes full of anger and sadness, she immediately showed a sweet smile. It turns out that the master still cares about it. I'm so happy. Ahem. Blood constantly gushed from her throat and soaked Ling Li's chest. Ling Li immediately wanted to pass more genuine energy to Ling Xian, but was stopped by Ling Xian. She trembled and wanted to wipe the tears from Ling Li's eyes. It's useless. Xian? Can't accompany the master? Xian, crack. Ling Xian's arm hung down. The third elder and Wen Tingshan had stopped fighting. The third elder looked complicated, while the third elder was expressionless. There was some comfort in his eyes. Ling Li slowly raised his head and stared at Su Li's pale face. His eyes were painful and sad. He said slowly, Why? Why did you kill Xian? No matter what she did wrong, she didn't deserve to die. You clearly knew. He had been with Ling Xian for 10 years. He had always regarded Ling Xian as his sister. But now the woman he loved most killed his sister. Drip, drip, the rain gradually subsided. A drop of water fell on the ground along Su Li's clothes. It was quiet and harsh. Ling Li stared at Su Li's eyes interrogatively. But today, he could no longer see a trace of warmth in her eyes. There was only coldness, tyranny, and disappointment. Ling Li was shocked. He had no time to understand what happened. Su Li's expressionless face bloomed with a smile. The smile was obviously brilliant. But in Ling Li's eyes, it was like a withered flower, leaving only sadness. Chapter 255. The fate was over. Ling Li suddenly raised his head and looked at the beautiful figure in red. He was stiff, as if he was struck by lightning. He couldn't believe it. Why did everything change in just one morning? What did Ling Xian do? Ling Li groaned in pain, but he was interrupted as soon as he spoke. Uncle Shan, let's go. Su Li whispered. Wen Tingshan's eyes flashed with sadness. He turned around and walked to the collapsed wall. He gently held Su Yu, who was already cold. Madam, wait a minute. This is all a misunderstanding. Ling Xian did it willfully. Neither I nor the fourth elder knew about it. Seeing that Su Li was about to leave, the third elder swallowed the second half of his words. Su Li looked back for a moment, and her cold eyes fell on him like a ghost. The third elder had goosebumps all over his body. He was so scared that he could no longer continue to speak. He was in the longevity realm, and Madam was just at the peak of the inborn realm. Why, corpse? Why is there a corpse? When Ling Li saw the middle-aged woman in Wen Tingshan's arms, he finally realized something. His face was extremely pale. This person must be close to Su Li. Ling Xian killed her. No wonder Su Li was furious. The third elder looked at Ling Li's back and sighed sadly. He said, Hierarch, I'm afraid that the truth is more serious than you think. It was too late when I arrived. Only the fourth elder knows the details. Ling Li's body shook slightly, but he didn't look back. He slowly bent down and picked up Ling Xian. After a moment of silence, his hoarse voice came out. Go back to the headquarters. Ling Li and the other three returned to the headquarters of the Spectre Shadow. One was dead and the other was injured. It naturally caused a great shock. All kinds of speculations came one after another. At this moment, in the backyard, the fourth elder came to the courtyard with a pale face with the help of the third elder. He saw Ling Li standing next to the coffin at a glance. The third elder sighed and shook his head slightly. He supported the fourth elder to walk over. The fourth elder already knew everything at this moment. He regretted it very much. When he saw Ling Li, he immediately burst into tears. He knelt down and cried, Hierarch, please punish me to death. I listened to Ling Xian's slander and made a big mistake. Ling Li turned around. He was expressionless and pale. What happened? Say it. When I was doing closed-door training in the Mountain of Elders, I suddenly received a secret letter from Ling Xian, saying that you were bewitched by the demoness, the fourth elder said. Ling Li's face became paler and paler. In the end, he was shaky and couldn't stand stably. Sect leader, your health is important. The third elder felt extremely distressed when he saw this. The hierarch's innate talent was unparalleled, and he was already half a step into the longevity realm. But now, because of a few words, he couldn't stand still. One could imagine how great the blow was. Phew! Taking a deep breath, Ling Li suddenly turned around and smashed the coffin into pieces in the horrified eyes of the two elders. Ling Xian, you are very good. Even if you die, you will let Li leave me completely. Ling Xian's eyes were red. Looking at Ling Xian's exposed face, she gnashed her teeth. What the fourth elder said was very detailed. When he heard that Ling Xian abused and killed Su Li, he couldn't wait to pull Ling Xian out of the coffin and kill her again. No matter how deep the affection was, when he wanted to kill Su Li with his own hands, it had already disappeared. Hierarch, the identity of the middle-aged woman is not simple. The fourth elder felt bitter, but he had to say something. I heard that Madame called her Aunt, and the woman's lower body was bleeding seriously. It is very likely that she is pregnant. What? The third elder widened his eyes and said in horror, why didn't you say it earlier? He thought that his discovery was serious enough, but he didn't expect that the fourth elder hid such a big secret. The fate is over. It turns out that the fate is over, that Li said. Ling Li's face was pale and he laughed wildly. No matter how much he hated Ling Xian was dead. She was a member of the Yinma cult, and he was the hierarch of the Yinma cult. She killed her relatives. How could Su Li marry the hierarch of the Yinma cult? Puff! Ling Li was so sad that he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood and fell unconscious. Hierarch! The third elder exclaimed, and the whole backyard was immediately in chaos. After a while, the third elder looked at Ling Li, who was lying on the bed with a pale face. He had a complicated expression and struggled for a while. Finally, he didn't dare to say what he saw. Madame of the hierarch might not live for 10 days. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. For Su Li, there was only endless darkness in these 3 days. She turned the street with one breath and fainted directly. In the morning, the slightly dazzling sunshine shone on her face. Su Li's eyelashes trembled, and she finally woke up. Wake up! Wake up! Finally, you wake up. Ling, go and call everyone. A familiar voice came to her ears, and her eyes were also blurred. Su Li frowned and adapted to it for a moment. Finally, she saw the figure beside the bed. Ruhan? Su Li was confused. It was Mei Ruhan sitting beside the bed. Wasn't she in Qinghe province? Why did she come to Yunjing City? When Mei Ruhan heard Su Li's hoarse voice, she couldn't help crying. At this moment, Su Li was not as brilliant as she used to be. Her face was terribly pale, just like a dead person, which made Mei Ruhan tremble. It's good that you are here. Su Li smiled and didn't ask the reason, because it was meaningless. She was proficient in the medical circle. How could she know that her foundation was destroyed and she didn't have many days to live? Soon, there was a messy sound of footsteps behind her. Su Li turned her head reluctantly. It was Xian Jingzhou who walked in the front. But at this moment, Xian Jingzhou's temples were gray, his eyes were red, and there were many wrinkles on both sides of his eyes, which made him look much older, like an old man in his twilight years. Uncle. Su Li's eyes were sad and blurred. She murmured and her pale lips immediately overflowed with blood. Now she was like a fragile porcelain full of cracks. Any fluctuation of her heart meridian might directly kill her. Xian Jingzhou was shocked. He strode to the edge of the bed and said, "People in Jianghu will get their shoes wet. Don't worry about your aunt. The most important thing for you now is to recover." No matter how sorrowful he was, the man chose to comfort Su Li. Su Li looked at Xian Jingzhou in a daze and suddenly smiled. "I know, uncle. You must be tired these days. Go and have a rest first." "I'm not tired." An ugly smile appeared on Xian Jingzhou's old face. "I have to take care of your aunt's funeral affairs. I don't have time to rest. As for you, it's better to put aside the matter of the Linli building and recover first." Xian Jingzhou left soon. Su Li could see that he was holding on. She didn't know whether he could hold on after her death. There were 6 people left in the room. Seeing Mei Ruhan and Fong Ling, whose eyes were red and swollen, Su Li couldn't help but chuckle. Ren, Ling, you two go out first. I have something to tell you. Don't be tired. Mei Ruhan stood up and reminded them. Then she went out of the attic with Fong Ling. At this moment, a cold female voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Tired? Mei Ruhan, your good friend can live for 6 days at most. It doesn't matter whether she is tired or not. What did you say? Mei Ruhan trembled all over. Fong Ling looked at her confusedly. What happened to Sister Ruhan? At the same time, the atmosphere in the room was solemn. Su Li sat up reluctantly and leaned against the pillow. After a moment of silence, she whispered, You should know that I don't have much time. As soon as the words came out, the 4 people in the room held their breath at the same time. Creak. Fong Yuan clenched his fists and stepped forward. The anxiety in his eyes almost broke through the limit. What panacea do you need? I'll go now. I'll go too. Chu Qingning's eyes were red. Su Li, I want to go back to Nanjiang with you. Don't die. Miss Su Li saved my life. If you need anything at this moment, I, Fong Mu, will do anything. I owe you a life. If you die, who can I find to pay the debt? Luo Yichen stared at Su Li and hoped that she could say something to save his life. But Su Li smiled and shook her head in everyone's expectant eyes. How could it be? Fong Yuan looked at the porcelain-like cheeks in front of him. The regret and despair in his heart broke out like a landslide and a tsunami. It's all Ling Li's fault. I'll kill him. Fong Yuan turned around and left. Chu Qingning and others wanted to stop him, but they were thrown away by him. His strength was so great that it was amazing. Even Luo Yichen was surprised. He hadn't seen Fong Yuan for a year. Fong Yuan's strength had made such great progress that he was not inferior to Luo Yichen. Su Li's expression became cold and she said faintly, If you want me to die with everlasting regret, go ahead. Fong Yuan's body shook violently. It seemed that his feet were splashed with glue. He could no longer move. He turned back and was full of resentment and complexity. He growled, What? Why do you still protect him at this time? Didn't he hurt you enough? Looking at Fong Yuan's questioning eyes, Su Li closed her eyes and hid the disappointment in her eyes. She said softly, I have killed the culprit. There is no need to entangle with the Yinma cult. I don't have much time. You should listen to the next arrangement. As long as it develops according to what I said, the Linli building will become a big cult and realize your wishes. Fong Yuan's eyes twitched. He was angry and anxious. He said bitterly, Are you still thinking about that at this time? Otherwise? Even if I die, I must fulfill the agreement. Su Li smiled. That smile seemed to be beyond the mortal world. It was a beautiful withering. Chu Qingning and others were moved and shocked. Fong Yuan's reaction was more violent. He made up his mind and held Su Li in his arms. Chu Qingning was stunned at first. Then he smiled bitterly for his friend. Wasn't it too late for this fool to express his love now? Luo Yichen couldn't bear it and turned his head. After he was moved, he couldn't bear to see such a scene. Chapter 256. Fong Yuan held Su Li for a while and felt the slight resistance in his arms. He took a deep breath and gently let go of Su Li for fear of aggravating her injury. I'll be back soon. Fong Yuan took a deep look at Su Li and then strode away. Although his heart was full of despair, he had to try his best. Let's go. The other 3 people also left, leaving Su Li to recuperate alone. Only in the state of not consuming strength could Su Li's life be extended to the greatest extent. Su Li looked at the backs of the people who left. Various emotions flashed through her eyes, including hatred, regret, and sadness. Finally, it became extremely complicated. She closed her eyes. The helpless sigh quietly echoed in the room. In the evening, Yun Yi came and soon left with a face of self-blame and heaviness. But it was impossible to make up for it. The only thing he could do was to try his best to complete the last order of the miss. At dinner, Fong Ling, Mei Ruhan and Yin Xuedong sat at the same table. The dishes on the table were full of color and smell, but no one touched the chopsticks. They were all in a daze. They had no appetite. Thinking of Su Li, the three people looked gloomy and didn't have the mood to eat. Mei Ruhan looked at the white rice in the bowl, and there was a hint of struggle in her eyes. About half a year ago, when she was checking the account, her wrist was accidentally pricked. From that day on, there often appeared a trace of unimaginable scenes in her dreams. But the familiarity from the soul made her involuntarily believe that the things in her dreams were true. If it was just a dream and didn't affect her daily life, it would be fine. But after this situation lasted for 3 months, something inexplicable happened to her. Another voice appeared in her mind out of nowhere. "Who are you?" Giggle. "I am you and you are me. There is no difference between you and me." The seductive and absolutely cold and arrogant tone was actually another her. She couldn't understand. The other her didn't seem to care about her feelings. She only told her that she must go to Yunjing City as soon as possible to be with Su Li. Otherwise, she would occupy this body and kill Luo Yichen personally. Mei Ruhan didn't believe it at first. But the next day, her consciousness was completely suppressed. She helplessly watched Su Li seduce Luo Yichen and do that shameful thing with him. Although at the last moment of breakthrough, Su Li gave control of the body to her, she still felt humiliated. At the same time, she was also afraid. She understood Luo Yichen's feelings for her, so he would not guard against her at all. If this person really occupied her body again to kill Luo Yichen, she could not stop him at all. "Don't worry. I just want you to be with Su Li. I won't hurt her. Every time I occupy your body, I will also suffer a great backlash, and I might even completely dissipate. How can I let myself fall into danger?" Mei Ruhan couldn't tell whether it was true or not. But for Luo Yichen, she cleverly used Wen Tingshan to come to Yunjing City with him. On the way, the voice in her mind also hid and stopped communicating with her. As time passed, she let go of the fear in her heart and turned it into anticipation. After a while, Li left Ling's hand. But she didn't expect that when Tingshan's expression changed greatly as soon as he entered Yunjing City. He rushed away and soon brought back Su Li, who was dying. Mei Ruhan was really scared. She almost stayed by Su Li's bed for 3 days. When Su Li woke up, she naively thought that Su Li was fine. Unexpectedly, the voice in her mind told her that Su Li was going to die. Of course, she didn't believe it. She eavesdropped outside the room. Soon, the senior management of the Linli building knew that Su Li was going to die. For Mei Ruhan, it was like a bolt from the blue. From the first time they met in the Muyang girls' school, she felt that Su Li was very congenial. After a few months, she knew how amazing Su Li's talent was. She just stayed with Su Li for a short time, but her understanding of literature soared. Later, Su Li took her to the Qinghe girls' school, which had a promising future. Then she established the Linli building. She knew that the world was so colorful. For her, Su Li was not only a good friend but also a teacher. She also wanted to see Su Li reach the Lingtian realm step by step and become a giant who controlled the martial arts circle. But the bad news came before she reached the halfway point. How could she accept it? Li is only 17 years old. How can she die? Mei Ruhan was full of unwillingness. "If you don't want her to die, I have a way." The seductive voice came slowly in her mind. Mei Ruhan was shocked and couldn't help but ask, "Really?" The seductive consciousness snorted and mocked. "Why should I lie to you? It's just that this method is not perfect. Your good friend may not accept it." Mei Ruhan frowned slightly, but the seductive consciousness was not anxious and let her hesitate. At this time, Mei Ruhan didn't find that her characteristics in some aspects were far beyond that of an 18-year-old girl. She also encountered a lot of events in Jianghu in the Linli building, but after all, she didn't participate in it personally. It could be said that Mei Ruhan had no experience in Jianghu at all. But facing a strange consciousness in her mind, she naturally chose to be vigilant. She even calmly confronted it and thought about the stakes. It was like an innate ability. In the blink of an eye, the dishes on the table were cold. Yin Xuetong cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks, and Fong Ling turned to boil medicine for Su Li. They were all tonics, but better than nothing. Mei Ruhan slightly raised her eyebrows and looked at the back of Yin Xuetong and Fong Ling. Her eyes gradually became firm. "You tell Su Li in person, and let her judge whether your method is credible or not. Mei Ruhan's decision was extremely witty. Her knowledge and cultivation were too much lower than Su Li's. If she listened to the words of the seductive consciousness, she might not know whether it was true or not. In this case, it was better to let Su Li see it in person. Mei Ruhan's consciousness came out, and the seductive voice sounded again in her mind, but this time it was a little angry. Impossible. You know that I will have a backlash if I occupy your body. She doesn't deserve me to show up in person. You don't deserve me? Or you don't dare? Mei Ruhan gritted her teeth and responded, You threaten me to come to Su Li. Obviously, you have a relationship with Su Li. Don't treat me as a fool. The seductive consciousness made a sound of anger, and then calmed down. She regained her composure and said with a smile, Good girl, you see it. In this case, I won't hide it. Su Li does have a relationship with me. In this case, I will risk the backlash to help her. Then let's go now. Mei Ruhan breathed a sigh of relief and immediately went upstairs without any delay. Squeak! The sound of the door being pushed came into Su Li's ears, and she immediately woke up. She was on the verge of death, so how could she fall asleep? At this moment, she just closed her eyes to rest. Seeing it was Mei Ruhan, Su Li looked gentle and pretended to be relaxed. It's so late. Why don't you go to rest? What are you doing here? I know. Mei Ruhan said, and her eyes turned red. Su Li was stunned, and her smile was more bitter, but her voice was still gentle. Life and death are predestined. If you have time to be sad now, why don't you chat with me more? Then I can leave happily. I don't want to. Mei Ruhan shook her head again and again. Suddenly, she stepped forward and grabbed Su Li's pale and slender hand. She whispered, Li, someone said that she has a way to help you. I don't believe her, so I can only let you judge the way she said. Su Li's eyes burst with amazing light when she heard this. If she could not die, who would want to die? What's more, she still had many things to do. How could she be willing to die like this? But even if she was unwilling, she could only despair and accept her fate in the face of a broken life. But now, Mei Ruhan actually said that there was a way. Who is she? Su Li asked, and the breath of Mei Ruhan in front of her instantly changed. The original pure eyes became strange and horrifying. The incompatible breath could not be tolerated by the world. This change was too bizarre. Even Su Li, who was calm, was stunned on the spot. Mei Ruhan seemed to be a different person. One person with two consciousnesses? How could it be possible? At this moment, Mei Ruhan saw Su Li's surprised face and smiled mysteriously. Senior sister apprentice, I haven't seen you for a long time. You? Call me senior sister apprentice? Su Li quickly calmed down and slightly frowned. Who are you? Senior sister apprentice, don't be surprised. I am Mei Ruhan, and Mei Ruhan is me. As for why I call you senior sister apprentice, it is naturally because I admire you very much. When we first met, I couldn't help calling you senior sister apprentice. Hearing the explanation of Mei Ruhan, Su Li's heart was full of doubts. Her explanation was obviously a lie. But if she went deeper, she might not get the answer. What is the life-saving method you mentioned? Su Li didn't have too much time and directly came to the point. Mei Ruhan giggled and said, Senior sister apprentice, you are really impatient. But I can understand. Next, I will tell you the method. Please stimulate the Neiguan acupoint of your left hand. It's better to use a sharp object to stab it 1 inch down. Su Li frowned and reached out to take a silver needle from the needle box beside the bed. Then she stabbed it into the Neiguan acupoint. The Neiguan acupoint was not a fatal acupoint. For ordinary people, it could cure diseases. But for warriors, it was a completely useless acupoint. So, she did not hesitate to implement what Mei Ruhan said. But this time, Su Li was destined to be surprised. Soon after the silver needle was stabbed, a pale red halo suddenly appeared out of thin air like a bracelet. It was engraved with complex patterns, revealing a mysterious and ancient atmosphere. What is this? Su Li was slightly surprised. How could such a thing be hidden in a person's Neiguan acupoint? This was completely against common sense. It was not mentioned in any medical books in the martial arts circle and the spiritual circle. Suddenly, Su Li's eyes flashed. She remembered the mysterious old beggar she met on the street a long time ago. He avoided her left hand and left a black pattern on her right hand. That old man also knew the secret. Chapter 257. Buzz. The red ring buzzed slightly and dimmed down. Su Li looked at the wrist that was disappearing, and various thoughts flashed through her eyes. At this time, Mei Ruhan took the initiative to explain, "This ring is of extraordinary significance. Not everyone has it. Only those who are born with extraordinary fate are qualified to have it. Senior sister apprentice, if you want to live, you have to rely on this ring." Su Li asked indifferently with no expression on her face. "There is no other way. Just break it." Mei Ruhan's eyes flashed and she said, "I have heard that there is another name for this ring, which is life ring. It is not related to the present life, but the previous life and the future life." Su Li was slightly shocked, but she showed doubt on her face. She mocked, "You even mentioned the previous life and the present life. It is really outrageous." Mei Ruhan smiled mysteriously and continued, "Don't doubt me. Even the existence like me can appear. Why can't the previous life and the present life? Your life ring is red jade, which proves that you have a very high foundation in the previous life. If you die now, the foundation of the previous life and the present life will be accumulated again to the next life. If you choose to break the ring, you can not only get the foundation of the previous life, but also the vitality of the next life in this life to maintain your life in this life." Su Li's pupils shrank slightly, and she showed an intention. She stroked her wrist with her palm and suddenly sneered, "I don't believe it. If someone can borrow the previous life and the next life, doesn't it mean that he can live forever regardless of his lifespan? If someone has tried this method, how can there be no records in the vast martial arts circle or even the spiritual circle? Senior sister apprentice, you can't find it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist." Mei Ruhan looked at Su Li for a few seconds, and then turned her eyes and said, "The world is so big. Maybe someone is using this method to prolong his life now, and the method I said is not perfect." Su Li narrowed her eyes and said in a flat voice, "What's the defect?" She didn't believe the consciousness that occupied Mei Ruhan's body, but she didn't completely believe it. She just wanted to get information from it, but it seemed that this person didn't mean to cover up the defect. "This method is against the harmony of nature, but if you take the initiative to break the past and the future, it will not lead to the wrath of nature. But there will be a small loss." Mei Ruhan explained very carefully, as if she was sincerely dispelling Su Li's doubts. After all, the foundation is the foundation. It is impossible to inherit all of the two lives. For example, if an old man who is about to die wants to live for 1 year, he needs to pay 2 years in both the previous life and the present life, which is 4 years. 4 times the consumption. Su Li's heart sank slightly, and the idea of calculation flashed through her mind. She was at the peak of the innate realm in her previous life and had a lifespan of 200 years. If she could also live for 200 years in her future life, these 2 lives could only extend her lifespan by 100 years. This was more than a small loss. Of course, Su Li knew that her idea excluded many factors and only calculated the foundation by lifespan. The real algorithm might be thousands of times more complicated. However, even so, if she could live for a few more decades, it would be enough for her to accomplish all her goals. Senior martial sister, are you thinking that even if you add up your previous and current lives, living for 100 years is enough? Mei Ruhan said in a slightly teasing tone with a bit of pity, "Then you are wrong. What you said is based on a premise." Su Li frowned slightly. "What precondition?" "You can't practice or use Xiangong." Su Li frowned more tightly. It was impossible for her to do that. If she wanted to continue to run the Lin Li building, she must maintain the identity of Mr. Li. Senior martial sister, the foundation of 2 lives plundered is turned into vitality, but it is also energy. Mei Ruhan raised a piece of thin paper and tore it piece by piece. If the foundation is compared to this piece of paper, every time you practice, you will swallow a part of the foundation. Every time you fight, you will also swallow the foundation. When the foundation is exhausted, you will really face death. Clatter! The thin paper was torn into pieces and fell to the ground. Su Li stared at the debris on the ground blankly. After a long silence, she slowly closed her eyes and whispered, "I am tired. You can go out." Mei Run changed her face slightly, but returned to normal in an instant. She stood up and said, "Then I will leave first. Occupying this body is also harmful to me. I will not appear again in the future. If you want to say something to me, you can ask this girl to pass the message." With that, she left the room without hesitation, closing the door behind her. Sensing the departure of Mei Run, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes, and a trace of sharpness flashed in her eyes. She knew clearly about the previous life. There was only endless misery. The foundation of the previous life was extremely high. It was all a lie. What he said after that was 9 lies and 1 truth. Although he didn't reveal a strong desire, he was trying to entice her to break the red bracelet on her wrist from beginning to end. Mei Ruhan had been living well in the Qinghe province. How could she not listen to Su Li and come to Yunjing City so soon? This consciousness must be in the way. Su Li suspected that this consciousness was coming for her. Even if she was not seriously injured this time, the consciousness might create opportunities for her to face a desperate situation and choose to break the bracelet. Thinking of this, Su Li showed a bitter face and sighed helplessly. No matter whether this person's purpose was good or evil, she was very clear that she was absolutely unwilling to die now. In such a desperate situation, the bracelet must be broken. This was an overt plot. There was only one way in front of her. In the next few days, Su Li had many strange dreams. The people in the dreams flew in the sky and hid in the ground. They were omnipotent like immortals in the sky. But these immortals were not as pure as the gossip in Jianghu. Instead, they became more greedy, cruel, and unscrupulous. In front of these immortals, the vicious behavior in the previous life seemed to be child's play. In the blink of an eye, 6 days passed. Fang Yuan returned to the Linli building and sat on Su Li's bed without saying a word. He completely lost his smile. How could he find a way to save Su Li in just 6 days? Later, Chu Qingning, Fang Mu and others came back one after another. They were all disappointed and speechless. They all came back to see Su Li for the last time. However, after one day, Su Li still lived well, and her face actually became a little ruddy. Is it the last radiance of the setting sun? Chu Qingning was full of sadness and didn't think much. Fang Yuan completely became a block of wood and stood motionless beside Su Li's bed. He and Yin Xuetong were responsible for preparing for Su Li's funeral. 3 days later, all the funeral arrangements had been made. But Chu Qingning was surprised to find that Su Li's pneuma did not weaken, but became stronger day by day. Her face also returned to normal. Compared with the pale and transparent face at the beginning, she was totally different. On the 4th day, Su Li sat up from the bed. She lifted the quilt and got out of bed. All the injuries on her body disappeared. Feeling the internal injuries in her body that healed quickly, Su Li shook her head and waved her hand, "Burn all the coffins and shrouds." Fang Yuan, who stood by the bed, was shocked. His eyes, which were originally full of doubt, completely turned into enthusiasm. Chu Qingning was stunned and then said with ecstasy, "Su Li, you won't die." Su Li touched her wrist and felt the huge and warm foundation of 2 lives. There was a hidden gloominess in her eyes, but she said gently, "For the time being, I won't die." Great. Chu Qingning was so excited that he almost jumped up. He quickly turned around and left. "I am going to burn those unlucky things and tell Xuetong the good news by the way." Su Li smiled and nodded gently. Only Fang Yuan frowned. For the time being, how long was it? Good news. Good news. Su Li came back to life. After Chu Qingning transmitted the sound several times, all the people who had known that Su Li was going to die received the news. They were no longer lifeless and were overjoyed. The ordinary disciples of the Linli building were confused and wondered why the lords were so excited today as if they had taken medicine. Great, that sister didn't lie. Mei Ruhan was also overjoyed. her hostility to the other consciousness was reduced a lot. She even called her sister. At this moment, the figure of consciousness hidden in the depths of Mei Ruhan's mind sensed Mei Ruhan's joy and immediately burst into ecstasy. Senior Sister Apprentice. Senior Sister Apprentice, you really broke the bracelet. Haha. God helps me. The misty eyes of the misty figure shone. At this moment, Senior Sister Apprentice should be dead and can never be reincarnated. Ha! Just for Ling Li, who is not a human being, Senior Sister Apprentice, you are so sad, haha. You suppressed me from the beginning. Everything is yours. Now everything is settled. I want the Master and the whole sect to know that only I am the eldest disciple with the strongest fate. Haha. The crazy laughter echoed in the depths of Mei Ruhan's awareness, but no one heard it. After dinner in the evening, Su Li left the Linli building. Her injuries and cultivation had been completely recovered. Naturally, she had to go back to the affiliated school of the National Academy to deal with the trouble of disappearing for more than 10 days. If it were in the past, she would definitely choose to leave by physical movement. But now, she chose to walk. She couldn't waste the foundation of her 2 lives on a meaningless journey. The Linli building was neither far nor close to the affiliated school of the National Academy. She walked for 4 hours to get there. Unexpectedly, as soon as she appeared at the door, she was greeted by Butler Wu, who was full of joy. Miss, you finally come back. It's so late. You walk alone at night. Aren't you afraid of danger? Next time, even if you know that the medicinal materials are precious, you must bring a helper. Wu Bin kept talking, but Su Li didn't show any boredom. Instead, she nodded with a smile. It won't happen next time. I will take Yun-Yi there. That's good. By the way, Master has been waiting here for many days. Go in quickly. Father is here? Su Li's eyes flashed a touch of complexity. She paused for a moment, but returned to normal in an instant. Then she walked into the room. Li, you finally come back. I was so worried. Let me have a look. Dong Feng-rui held Su Li anxiously and looked her left and right. When he found no trace of injury, he was relieved. After exhorting for a while, he fell asleep tiredly. He hadn't closed his eyes for several days. After the room was quiet, Yun-Yi came out from the darkness in shock. He stammered and asked, Miss, you? Su Li waved her hand and said, something happened. Anyway, I am fine for the time being. Miss, you are blessed by God. That's great. I am going to tell the brothers to cancel the original plan. Yun-Yi left quickly. Su Li looked at his back and gently stroked her left wrist. The foundation was as boundless as the ocean, which always reminded her how much time was left. Chapter 258. 10,000 Years. The Foundation of 10,000 Years. Su Li sensed the depth of the foundation, and her first reaction was that she sensed it wrong. But no matter how she repeatedly confirmed, the foundation of 10,000 years was clearly there, without any change. Just as she had expected, the consciousness had lied to her. Su Li's eyes flashed. According to the consciousness, the foundation of her 2 lives would not exceed 1,000 years at most, but now, it was a horrible 10,000 years. The reason for breaking the bracelet was false from beginning to end. There must be an ulterior purpose for the consciousness to make her break the bracelet. But it was useless for her to regret, and the foundation of 10,000 years is enough to support me to achieve my goal. Su Li murmured to herself in a low voice. Her eyes were clear. Looking at the light appearing in the sky, she turned around and sat down cross-legged, slowly closed her eyes and meditated. If this scene was seen by people who knew the inside story, they would be shocked and angry and stop Su Li. East-rising purple air was the best time to cultivate. But for Su Li now, it was tantamount to a life-threatening talisman. Every time she practiced, her life would be shortened a little. Unfortunately, now only Su Li knew this secret. As for the consciousness, in order to achieve its goal, it would not disclose it to others. After the morning sun was bright, Su Li opened her eyes. An amazing light with strong surprise flashed from her eyes. She discovered that the speed of her cultivation had increased by a shocking amount. Just the practice of less than 2 hours made the total amount of her genuine energy increase visibly. If she kept practicing in isolation, wouldn't she soon reach the peak of the inborn ninth hurdle and start to break through the longevity realm? Moreover, because of the acceleration of cultivation, the speed of condensing the immortal house also improved. If there was no accident, she could break through the longevity realm in 2 months. It was too fast. It was so fast that it was frightening. Who had ever seen a 17-year-old practitioner of the longevity realm? No one had ever heard of it, let alone seen it. Even in the spiritual circle, it was impossible to see it. While Su Li was puzzled, she brushed her wrist with her palm and felt it. Her heart immediately sank. Although the feeling was not very clear, she had just practiced for 2 hours, but her foundation had been reduced by at least 1 year. 1 year of life, in exchange for 2 hours of practice. Didn't it mean that she would lose 12 years of life for 1 day of practice in isolation? 10,000 years is too little. Su Li looked indifferent, but her sigh floated out of the window and dissipated in the air. From this moment on, time had stopped for her. How long she could live depended on herself. After a while, Mammy Li called Su Li to have breakfast with Lord Rui. Su Li hadn't had a meal with Lord Rui for a long time. Lord Rui was so happy that he grinned from ear to ear and kept putting snacks for Su Li. In the middle of the meal, Su Li suddenly put down her chopsticks and said, "Dad, accompany me to a place today." "Dad will go with you." Prince Rui hurriedly nodded his head and did not ask where it was before agreeing. As a Wang Yi and a Wang Yi who did not have any real power in the court, he was usually very idle and did not have any other matters to deal with today. Of course, even if there were, Dongfang Rui would immediately refuse to accompany Su Li. His precious daughter was usually too cold. Although she respected and loved him, they were not close. He had no good way to make up for it. Now, Su Li suddenly proposed to travel with him. How could he refuse? "Thank you." Su Li smiled slightly. Dongfang Rui smiled and nodded slightly. But he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Why did he feel that his daughter's smile was very reluctant? Wu Bin got the news and quickly prepared the carriage. Yun Yi sat in front of the carriage and was about to set off. But he was stunned and asked curiously, "Miss, where are we going?" "The osmanthus forest." Su Li took a light breath and slowly said 3 words, as if these words weighed thousands of kilograms. Yun Yi was slightly shocked. He didn't ask any more questions and set off with the whip. Dongfang Rui sat beside Su Li and felt puzzled. The osmanthus forest was the burial place of Yun. Now it was not the day of memorial. Why did they go there? Half a day later, Su Li and the other 2 came to the top of the mountain. Dongfang Rui's doubts were finally solved because there was a new grave next to Su Yu's grave. Who is it? How dare they? How dare they set a grave next to Yun? Dongfang Rui was very angry. Before he finished his words, Yun Yi gently pulled his sleeve and secretly reminded him, "Master, look at the words on the tombstone first. This grave was approved by Mississippi, otherwise, who dares to build a grave here without authorization?" Was it approved by Li? Dongfang Rui was stunned and immediately looked at the tombstone. When he saw the 2 lines on the tombstone, he was immediately shocked and couldn't help himself. At this time, Su Li had already walked to the tombstone. She knelt down without hesitation and kowtowed 3 times. The grave of Su Yu, the deceased wife. The grave of Su Yu, the deceased son. The grave was built by Xian Jingzhou alone. He used his hands to remove the hard soil and stones and then covered it with mud little by little. Only then did he know that Su Yu was pregnant for a short time. The news came that she died. No one knew how painful he was. Su Li knelt for a long time and said nothing. She heard from Chu Qingning that Xian Jingzhou shed 2 lines of blood and tears. After getting the news that Su Li was fine, he chose to go to Jianghu and left the place that made him sad and crazy. Russell Dongfang Rui approached and finally stopped behind Su Li. He said in an uncertain and trembling tone, "Is she Yun's elder sister?" Su Li stopped throwing paper money into the brazier. She gently nodded and said calmly, "My aunt died a few days ago. She was pregnant." Dongfang Rui was shocked and speechless. He was inexplicably sad. If Su Yu died, only Li was left in the Su family. He frowned and soon thought of something strange. He didn't know that Su Yu died. But Su Li got the news first? Moreover, in the past 10 days, Su Li suddenly disappeared and Su Yu died. How could it be so coincidental? Li, tell me the truth. Does your aunt's death have anything to do with you? Su Li's movements stopped completely. There was a trace of obscure pain in her eyes. After a long time, she shook her head and continued to burn paper money for Su Yu without saying a word. Such a silent attitude made Dongfang Rui firmly believe that Su Yu's death must have something to do with his daughter. His heart became heavier. He knew that his daughter had always been mysterious. Every time Su Li disappeared, she didn't deliberately cover it up. He was not blind. How could he not notice it? If you don't want to say it, I won't force you. But you must protect yourself. You are the only descendant of the Su family. Even for your mother, don't put yourself in danger. Do you understand? Dongfang Rui's low voice came into her ears. Su Li's body was slightly stiff. She threw the last paper money and then turned around. She smiled sweetly. I know, Dad. I won't let you down. Dongfang Rui knew that Su Li took his words seriously. He was a little relieved and said softly, It's late. You can leave after worship. Come back on the Qingming festival. I want to be alone. You and Yun Yi can go to the foot of the mountain to have a rest. I will come back soon. Dongfang Rui was used to Su Li's request. He nodded and turned to go down the mountain with Yun Yi. After they went far away, the smile on Su Li's face gradually disappeared. At last, she became indifferent and cold. Her eyes were like lightning. She looked at the messy and lush grass and said coldly with no expression, Do you want me to invite you out? Soon after she said that, the grass that was blown by the wind moved and a person came out. Seeing the face of this person, Su Li was shocked. Her eyes became colder and she said, What are you doing here? Ling Li's pale face was stunned. Seeing Su Li in plain white clothes and the hatred and alienation in her eyes, he was more bitter. He said, I just come to worship my aunt. Su Li's indifferent face was full of sarcasm. She sneered, Aunt? Why do you call her aunt? Cult Master Ling's skin is indeed much thicker than I imagined. Ling Li's heart ached and his eyes were full of bitterness. She had said the same thing not long ago, but the meaning behind it was completely different now. But all of this was not what he wanted to happen. Ling Xian was also dead. Su Li killed him personally. Even if he wanted to atone, he didn't know how to do it. After thinking about it, he could only worship Su Yu. But coincidentally, he met Su Li. I already know the ins and outs of the matter. Su Li. Ling Li was interrupted by Su Li indifferently before he said, The tomb of the Su family doesn't deserve your worship. Hierarchling, please go back. Ling Li's expression changed. He gritted his teeth and said, Li, tell me what to do. Get out. Su Li, get out. Su Li's voice became hoarse. She looked directly at Ling Li. There was no love in her eyes, but only monstrous hatred and cold ruthlessness. Ling Li, from now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other. You are not allowed to come to the tomb of the Su family. If I see you again, I will take action. After that, Su Li turned around and stepped away without any hesitation. Ling Li's eyes were red. He shouted in a trembling voice, Su Li, you obviously like me these days. You said, wait for me. Are they all fake? Su Li's body slightly paused, and then disappeared from Ling Li's eyes at a faster speed. A ruthless voice came from afar. The world is changeable. I don't blame anyone but the natural law. I'm not a good match for you. Child Ling, you should find someone else. Everything in the past is just a passing cloud. I have forgotten it. Forgotten it? Ling Li smiled bitterly. It turned out that he was the only one who fell in love with her. It turned out that everything was just a play. But he took it seriously. At the foot of the mountain, Yun Yi saw Su Li coming. His eyes were slightly red, but he still keenly noticed it. Miss cried, Poor Madame Su Yu. Chapter 259. After the storm, Su Li's life became calm, at least on the surface. Of course, for ordinary people in Yunjing City, the so-called storm was just the collapse of the old house and the city wall, nothing else. Su Li announced that she would no longer give lectures. She was the only one in the affiliated school of the National Academy, and no other geniuses lived there. Such an announcement caused a lot of uproar. But Su Li was the princess, and she was supported by Lord Vrui. At least on the surface, no one dared to refute. The affiliated school of the National Academy became a private mansion, and Ling Li couldn't find an excuse to come in. Most of the time, Su Li practiced in the mansion and rarely went out. In the eyes of outsiders, she was about to get married. The intelligence of the Lin Li building was sent by Feng Yuan every night. On the day when Su Li woke up, his intention was exposed. Su Li neither agreed nor refused. He had decided to let go of his mind and go further. But Su Li's change during this time scared him away. Yes, scared away. Su Li was cold on the outside but warm on the inside in the past. She had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. But now, Su Li gave him the feeling that she was cold from inside to outside. Her indifferent eyes were no longer mixed with any personal feelings, as if nothing in the world could shake her again. She was ethereal and ruthless, like a lonely fairy in the cold moon palace. Feng Yuan's eyes were filled with endless loss. Although Su Li didn't say it clearly, her back had given him the answer. She would not marry anyone in this life. Who? In the night wind, Feng Yuan leaned against the door and gently breathed out a mouthful of turbid air. His eyes were bright and firm, and he smiled slightly. If you don't marry in your life, I won't marry anyone. I will stay with you. In this way, he was also happy and satisfied. At the same time, in the Ling mansion, Ling Li sat in the wheelchair calmly. Ling Mo silently pushed the wheelchair to the front of Qiumeng's room. Then Qiumeng came out and pushed Ling Li in. He stayed outside the door. Ling Mo looked up at the sky. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. It seemed that tomorrow would be a good day. When he came back, everything was over. Ling Mo sighed in his heart. The death of Ling Xian made him sigh, but it was just a sigh. Although she was also the young master's right-hand man and had grown up with the young master, their relationship was not close. Because he instinctively hated women who were too scheming. Although he didn't understand women, he knew that Ling Xian was not broad-minded. Over the years, Ling Xian had secretly eradicated many dissidents in the cult. Although that kind of behavior was less in recent years, it couldn't change his perception. A few days ago, when he arrived at the destination, he knew that he was deceived by Ling Xian with false information. He immediately returned. Unfortunately, although Miss Su survived, she still made a big mistake. Thinking of this, Ling Mo couldn't help but sigh. If Ling Xian was still alive, maybe the master could exchange her for forgiveness. But now Ling Xian was buried, and the situation was complicated. As long as the master was the hierarch of the Yinma cult, it would be impossible for him to marry Miss Su. But for the sake of the Ling family, the young master couldn't give up the identity of the Yinma cult. This was a dead knot. No one could undo it. Inside the house. Li, tell me the truth. What happened between you and Su Li? Did they quarrel? Quarrel? Hearing his mother's words, Ling Li was full of depression, but he pretended to be indifferent. He shook his head and smiled. It's okay, mother. I can deal with it myself. Seeing this, Qiumeng frowned more tightly. No matter what, Ling Li was her son. She watched him grow up. How could she not see that Ling Li was forcing himself to smile? In the past few months, she saw her son go out happily every day. She thought that the marriage was going to be finished soon. But recently, Su Li suddenly announced that she would stop teaching and no one was allowed to enter the mansion. In fact, she was resisting Ling Li. Something must have happened. But her son didn't say it. She couldn't ask Su Li, could she? Immediately, Qiumeng could only say helplessly, Son, since Su Li appeared, you have changed your ways recently. You don't go to those brothels. I am very pleased, but I don't want to see you hurt because of love. If Su Li really doesn't want to marry into the Ling family, you'd better forget her as soon as possible. Ling Li trembled slightly, and his eyes flashed with struggle. Forget her? Was it possible? At this moment, Ling Yamo reported outside the door. Madam, Master Qinglan is here. Chiu Meng frowned and murmured, "It's so late. Why does he come here?" After a while, Ling Qinglan opened the door and saw Ling Li, who looked haggard. He couldn't help but smile and said, "Aunt, I heard that my cousin is in a bad mood. I finished the case and came to see him." Chiu Meng's eyes brightened. She walked to Ling Qinglan and whispered, "You come at the right time. I talked to your brother, but he refused to talk. You two are similar in age. Maybe it's more useful for you to talk to him. Take him back to the East Courtyard." "Auntie, Qinglan understands." Ling Qinglan nodded slightly and pushed Ling Li's wheelchair back to the East Courtyard. Ling Mo closed the door and guarded at the door. Ling Qinglan shook his head helplessly and sighed, "I have already known it from Ling Mo. To put it bluntly, I am not used to it when there is no one around you." Ling Li's expression was slightly cold, but his face was still calm. He said in a low voice, "It's so late. What are you doing here?" Ling Qinglan was stunned. Ling Li's reaction was much quieter than he imagined. A few months ago, Ling Li's performance clearly showed that he liked Su Li very much. Now such a thing happened. He should not let it go so easily. Looking at Ling Li's quiet eyes, Ling Qinglan's heart sank slightly. Maybe it was not quiet. "There is one thing I have to tell you. Su Qingtan is out of practice." Ling Qinglan's sudden words really shocked Ling Li. Even Ling Mo couldn't help but turn his head to look. After practicing in practice for more than half a year, Su Qingtan has broken through the inborn realm and mastered Qiu Xiangong. Now he is waiting outside the East Courtyard. Hearing Ling Qinglan's words, Ling Li frowned and said, "How much does Su Qingtan know about Su Li?" Ling Qinglan smiled and said, "He just came out of practice for less than 2 hours and was directly brought here by me. How much do you think he knows?" Ling Li's expression changed and his eyes flickered. But only after a moment, the light in his eyes dimmed. Su Li was not an ordinary woman. She was as intelligent as a demon. In some aspects, she was even more enchanting than him. If he used Su Qingtan to restore the relationship, it would only make Su Li farther away from him. Thinking of this, Ling Li sighed slightly and said with a little tiredness, "Qiu Xiangong is the unique martial art of the Yinma cult. From the day you imparted it to him, it was destined that Su Qingtan couldn't leave the Yinma cult. Otherwise, even I can't protect him. Let him come in first." Ling Qinglan was slightly surprised and immediately took a deep look at Ling Li, who closed his eyes to rest. Did he still want to reconcile with Su Li in such a situation? Outside the East Courtyard, Su Qingtan's pale face showed some confusion and curiosity. This was the famous Ling general's mansion. Why did Ling Qinglan bring him here? "I have really mastered Qiu Xiangong. My cultivation has reached the inborn realm. No matter who I meet, I have the strength to be confident." Su Qingtan was full of confidence. More than half a year ago, he was just an ordinary man who was not even a senior in Jianghu. Now he directly skipped the acquired 9th hurdle and reached the inborn realm. Since then, he had become extraordinary. He was no longer a soft persimmon that could be bullied by others. In the future, he could also use his own strength to protect his second sister and make her safe and happy all her life. "Qingnan, come in." Ling Qinglan's voice came. Su Qingtan was slightly shocked and came to his sense. He did not hesitate to walk into the East Courtyard. Compared with half a year ago, his attitude towards Ling Qinglan had changed dramatically. It could be said that at the beginning, Su Qingtan was almost forced to join the Yinma cult by Ling Qinglan. He always had some resentment in his heart. Later, during the time of practicing in seclusion, he got a lot of secret information from the middle-aged guard beside Ling Qinglan. It turned out that his cultivation was exchanged with Ling Qinglan's life. If Ling Qinglan didn't have other opportunities and escaped from death, he would have died long ago. Ling Qinglan's original purpose was to let Su Qingtan take over his position in the Yinma cult. Su Qingtan trusted Ling Qinglan and sacrificed himself. Although Ling Qinglan had selfish motives, it was really a great favor for him. How could he still resent Ling Qinglan? He only had gratitude and admiration in his heart. Not everyone had the courage to sacrifice his own life for others. At least he couldn't do it. Ling Qinglan, who could do this, naturally won his respect. Creak, Su Qingtian lowered his head and followed him in. His heart was beating like a drum. The atmosphere in the room was very depressing. Well, Su Qingtian, this is the hierarch of our cult. Come and greet him first. Ling Qinglan said lightly. Su Qingtian was refreshed. It was a great honor for him to meet the legendary Child Li today. He raised his head and saw the expressionless young man sitting in the wheelchair. His respectful expression immediately turned into astonishment. He didn't come to his sense for a long time. He subconsciously turned his head to look at Ling Qinglan. The latter smiled gently and said, "There is no doubt. Child Li is the third master of the Ling family, Ling Li." Su Qingtian's eyes widened when he heard the words. He was shocked in his heart. The famous #1 waste in Yunjing City should be the hierarch of the Yinma cult who was feared in the martial arts circle. How could it be possible? Su Qing, greet you, hierarch. Su Qingtian was dizzy and finished the salute in confusion. If it was someone else, Ling Li would definitely scold him. But facing Su Qingtian, Ling Li just nodded slightly and let him go. Ling Mo, tell him about Su Li in the past 6 months. When Su Qingtian heard the name, Su Li, he was shocked. The second sister even got the attention of Child Li. What happened in the past 6 months? After 5 minutes, he heard Ling Mo's words. He opened his mouth slightly and was completely stunned. Chapter 260. An hour later, Su Qingtian followed Ling Qinglan and left the Ling mansion in a daze. What he heard and saw tonight was really a little too shocking. Lord, we've arrived at the Su mansion. The coachman's humble voice came into his ears, which brought Su Qingtian back to reality from his distant contemplation. He jumped off the carriage and let the coachman leave. Looking at the slightly old plaque of Su Mansion hanging on the small mansion, he sighed with emotion. The Su family had changed a lot in half a year. Knock, knock. Soon after the knock sounded, the door was pushed open, and the sleepy concierge stuck his head out of the door. When he saw Su Qingtian in black, he was stunned at first, and then he widened his eyes and said with joy, "First Master, you're back." Su Qingtian nodded with a smile. Anyway, his mother and brother were here. It was his home. The concierge quickly opened the door to let Su Qingtian in, and then he shouted excitedly, "Master, madam. First Master is back. First Master is back." Really? Many servants were woken up and came out one after another. Not long after, there was a burst of dense footsteps in the backyard. Then Su Huanli, Li Yuelian and Su Qinghao hurried to the front hall. When they saw Su Qingtian standing straight like a pine tree in the front hall, they were all surprised. Eldest brother. Li Yuelian stepped forward and grabbed Su Qingtian's hand. She choked with tears in her eyes and said, "What on earth can delay you for half a year? I'm really worried about you." Mother. Seeing his mother, Su Qingtian's cold expression became gentle, and he comforted her softly. The woman had never treated him badly since he was a child. No matter whether he was excellent or not, and no matter whether his decision was right or not, she always stood on his side without hesitation. Although his mother didn't like the second sister very much before, she didn't bully her. It had nothing to do with his mother that Su Li left the Su family. Eldest brother. Su Qinghao's eyes sparkled with excitement. In his mind, the eldest brother was his real idol. In just 2 years, the eldest brother stood out from the poor children and became the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. Ordinary people couldn't do that. How, you've grown taller. Su Qingtian smiled happily and touched Su Qinghao's head. Su Qinghao shook his head awkwardly and complained, "Eldest brother, I have grown up." Su Qingtian immediately burst into laughter. This silly boy was still the same as before. It's good that you're back. The family has been in a mess these days. Su Huanli showed a bitter face. When he was about to say something, he saw that Su Qingtian's gentle expression suddenly became extremely cold. "I have learned the details from the Supreme Judiciary. Dad, what do you want to say?" Su Huanli's face changed slightly, and then his old face turned red because of anger. His son was kind to his mother and brother, but his son gave him a hard time as soon as he came back. You unfilial son. Do you know who you're talking to? What kind of attitude is this? Su Huanli pulled a long face and cursed. Su Qingtan's face became colder. When he was about to take action, another silver-haired old woman came into the room. She was Ma'am Su Chui, the mother of Su Huanli, who was the most senior in the Su family. Su Chui ran fast with a crutch. When she came, she pulled Su Qingtan's sleeve tightly and talked like a machine gun. Oh, my good grandson, you're finally back. If you don't come back, I don't know how my Su family will be bullied by area. As soon as the words came out, Su Qingtan slightly narrowed his eyes and said nothing. But Su Qinghao couldn't help but stand up and refute with full confidence. Grandma, you're wrong. Second sister didn't bully us. It's the first aunt who bullied us too much and asked for it. Shut up. Su Chui's face became gloomy. She scolded Su Qingtan so fiercely that his face turned pale. If he didn't have filial piety in his heart, he would go up and beat the old woman. Not because of anything else, but because she was a complete and utter scum. He glanced at Su Qingtan, who was expressionless. He made up his mind and no longer cared about his mother's usual warning. He snorted and said, "You are actually my grandma. It really makes me feel ashamed." Su Chui was so angry that her eyes turned round. She grabbed Su Qingtan, who was indifferent, with one hand and pointed at Su Qinghao with the other. She scolded, "Bastard! I am your grandma. How dare you talk to me in this tone? How did your mother teach you?" She didn't see Su Qingtan's increasingly dangerous eyes. She continued to pretend to be pitiful. "Eldest grandson, I'm afraid you don't know what happened these days. Your first mother and third sister were harmed by the vicious area. I don't know what kind of suffering my poor little Yen is suffering in the frontier now. Zipei is even reduced to a slave. All of this is done by area, whom you try to protect. Such a vicious girl, you have been protecting her before. Do you know that she dared to rob Zipei's status of the princess? She is really cunning and vicious. If you are still stubborn, maybe she will use you in the future." After the evil girl became the princess, she didn't come back even once. She didn't bring any benefits to the Su family. I am so angry. Su Chui was more and more angry. She beat her chest and persuaded him earnestly. She dared to say that because of her seniority. To put it bluntly, she was taking advantage of her seniority. She was the most senior in the whole Su family. Even if she said it bluntly, no one would disobey her. At least she thought so. But when she finished her long persuasion, the whole room fell into a terrible silence. Su Qingtan didn't respond. This made Ma'am Su Chui panicked and kept cheering herself up. No way. She was Su Qingtan's grandma. Ha! After a long silence, Su Qingtan suddenly smiled and said to Ma'am Su Chui, "Grandma, have you finished?" Su Chui looked happy. When she was about to add something, the smile on Su Qingtan's face disappeared instantly and became cold. Su Chui, I respect you as an elder. But who gave you the courage to lie? Do you think that everyone in the world is a fool except you? Then Ma'am Su Chui's face changed dramatically. She was so angry that she trembled and pointed at Su Qingtan. "Unfilial son, how dare you disobey your grandma?" Su Qingtan's eyes were cold. He shook off Ma'am Su Chui's hand, suddenly staggered and almost fell down. "Because you are my grandma, otherwise, do you think that you can still stand and talk to me?" As Su Qingtan spoke, a trembling momentum originated from the inborn realm instantly pressed down. Su Chui couldn't stand the pressure. She fell to the ground instantly. Her wrinkled face was full of fear. Su Qingtan dared to hurt her. This was the Dahan country, which took filial piety as the most important thing. There is filial piety in the book. We should respect the elders, but it doesn't mean blind filial piety. Do you think that you can play with the whole family in the palm of your hand because you are my grandma? Su Qingtan looked indifferent and said, "I didn't care about all kinds of dirty things in the Desa town because the second sister didn't want to care about it. Now Zhu Yen and Su Zipei robbed the second sister's opportunity, but you turn black and white upside down. Do you want me to help you to hurt the second sister? Su Chui fell to the ground. Her old body trembled and she couldn't speak. Su Qingtan became completely different after he came back for more than half a year. The filial piety in his heart was no longer an iron restraint. In the past, no matter how angry he was, he couldn't directly hurt Ma'am. But now he did it without hesitation. Chiu Xiangong. Su Qingtan was expressionless, but he sighed in his heart. After all, it was an evil martial art. It had a little influence on his temperament, but he didn't dislike it. If he really cared about it, he would be more grateful to Ling Qinglan for giving him this opportunity to transform. Otherwise, he would continue to be bound by the indoctrination of the sages of the Dahan country. Everyone listen up. Su Chui will live in the back 3 courtyards. She can't go out of the courtyard. Except for the daily necessities, no one can obey her orders. If anyone disobeys her orders, he will be expelled from the Su family directly. As soon as Su Qingtan's order came out, Su Huanli's face changed greatly. Even Li Yuelian's expression was a little strange. Only Su Qinghao was happy and clenched his fist hard. He didn't like the old witch for a long time. Now she finally got the punishment she deserved from the eldest brother. Since Su Qingtan became the officer of the Supreme Judiciary, the sovereignty of the Su family fell in his hands. At this moment, when he gave an order, a bold servant immediately took Ma'am Su Chui out. Staying in the backyard and waiting for death was the end of Ma'am. After doing this, Su Qingtan glanced at the servants and maids coldly. He snorted and said, "If I hear any more rumors about the second sister, you will all be expelled from the Su family. Do you understand?" The servants answered in unison and then retreated with awe. There were only Su Huanli, Li Yuelian and Su Qinghao in the room. Su Qingtan looked at Su Huanli. Although his tone was respectful as a son, it also contained a warning. "Father, the Su family doesn't need to worry about food and clothing. It all depends on the byway building left by the second sister. You should be satisfied. Contented people can always be happy. You have lived for so many years. Don't you know that?" Su Huanli's pupils shrank slightly. He snorted angrily and left. To deal with Su Li? He was not as bold and crazy as Ma'am Su Chui and Zhu Yan. How could he offend Su Li, who was already a princess? He never thought about that kind of thing. It was enough for him to protect the byway building and make money. Li Yuelian sighed softly and walked to Su Qingtan. There was a trace of appreciation in her eyes. She said, "You deserve to be my son. You can distinguish right from wrong. I understand some things, but in order to protect myself, I have to do this. Now you become the person in charge of the Su family. Naturally, you don't need to be so careful. Today, you showed your courage. I am very pleased." Su Qingtan was a little embarrassed by the praise. He knew that his mother was very smart, so he didn't worry that his mother would be prejudiced against him. "Well, it's late. You should take a bath and have a rest." Li Yuelian was very tired after a busy day. Soon she went to have a rest. Only Su Qinghao and Su Qingtan talked by candlelight. "Eldest brother, the second sister hasn't changed after she became a princess. Except that she is a little busy at ordinary times, there is no obstacle for me to take the fourth sister to play there. It's not like what Grandma said." Su Qinghao wanted to clarify for Su Li, so he said in detail what happened in the past 6 months. Chapter 261. The frost in the early morning of spring was very thick. Both sides of the street were covered with white, and it would not fade until the sun rose. In the room where Su Li lived in the affiliated school of the National Academy, the charcoal crackled, and wisps of heat rose from the holes of the heater, making the room as warm as spring. Su Li wore a thin coat and reclined on the soft couch by the window. A pair of clear eyes stared at the old booklet in her hand. She was extremely fascinated. When the first ray of morning light came in through the window, Su Li squinted her beautiful eyes and put down the booklet in her hand. "I didn't expect that after breaking the ring, my understanding has been improved so much. In just 2 days, I have comprehended the 4th hurdle of AO sword skills, and I am not far from the 5th hurdle." She couldn't think of the disadvantages of breaking the ring, and the consciousness in Mei Ruhan's mind would not tell her. So, it was useless to think about how to use the foundation after breaking the ring. She had made some discoveries after studying these days. The speed of practice had become faster. And it was not just a little bit faster. If she wanted, she could break through to the longevity realm in another month. Her current state was more suitable to, say, conversion than to practice. Converting the foundation into cultivation was certainly faster than absorbing the spiritual power from the outside world. Of course, the more and faster she practiced, the closer she would be to death. If she couldn't grasp this point well, it would be useless to have a higher cultivation. The second point was the improvement of the understanding. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. She had obtained AO sword skills from Jinqing AO for a long time, but she always lingered in the fourth hurdle and couldn't enter the fifth hurdle. Although she had some achievements in swordsmanship in the previous life, her talent was still not good enough to comprehend such a wonderful book as AO sword skills. But these defects disappeared after the ring was broken. It seemed that her innate understanding was so enchanting and beyond the cognition. Fortunately, I comprehend AO sword skills based on my understanding and didn't consume the foundation. Otherwise, no matter how much foundation I have, I can't stand the consumption. Su Li sighed softly. If a warrior only had the strength of genuine energy without the means to fight against the enemy, he was simply a waste. A Xiantian second-stage martial artist who only knew how to practice. If he were to encounter a Xiantian first-stage martial artist who had gone through hundreds of battles, then he might not even be able to last one move. Cultivation was one aspect, and martial techniques were another. Only by possessing both could one become an expert of the same level. My cultivation is now stuck at the peak of the inborn realm. I don't know how much foundation will be consumed to break through to the longevity realm. Now it's not the right time, and I don't have to rush to break through. It's better to spend all my time on martial arts. With my terrifying comprehension, I may be able to compete with the longevity realm. While Su Li was thinking, Mammy Li's joyful voice came from outside the door. "Young miss, the young master is here." Young master? Su Li was stunned, and then the indifference on her face became gentle. "Is it my eldest brother?" "That's right. Young Master Qingten just came back last night and came this morning." Mammy Li's voice came again. A smile appeared on Su Li's face. "Let eldest brother wait for a while. I will change my clothes now." Sigh. Mammy Li responded and quickly went to reply. Soon after, Su Li changed her clothes and came to the front room. Then she saw Mammy Li and Su Qingten chatting casually. "Mammy, if you didn't take the risk to find me 2 years ago, I wouldn't know that my second sister had suffered so much. Now the bitterness is over and the happiness is coming. What the young master said is right." Su Qingtan sighed with emotion. Su Li's origin did not affect his love for Su Li, which began to sprout a long time ago. Now that he knew that Su Li was not related to him by blood, he didn't know what his feelings for Su Li were. "Eldest brother." A clear and melodious voice suddenly came, which was as sweet as clear spring water. Su Qingtan's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw Su Li in plain white clothes walking towards him. Her temperament was more ethereal than before, and her skirt was fluttering like a fairy descending to the world. Su Qingtan was stunned for a while. He hadn't seen his second sister for more than half a year. Although her beautiful face was covered by the secret skill of nothing unusual, it was still intoxicating. "Eldest brother, what are you looking at?" The voice was getting closer. Su Qinggan came to his sense and smiled bitterly. "Second sister, with your appearance now, I'm afraid that many people will come to propose marriage to you." Su Li squinted her eyes and chuckled. "Eldest brother, what are you talking about? No one comes and no one dares to come." Hearing this, Su Qingtan was stunned again. In his impression, his second sister would never say such overbearing words. She became confident and calm. She was no longer a weak girl who had to ask for his opinion. If he compared Su Li to a frightened deer in the past, now she became an elegant white swan, noble and cool. Thinking of Su Li's current identity, Su Qingtan's expression was slightly stiff. He forced a smile and said, "Second sister, You seem to have changed a lot in the past half a year. People always change. Su Li pretended to sigh and immediately hugged Su Qingtan's arm. She said seriously, "But no matter how I change, you are my eldest brother." Su Qingtan was slightly stunned. He was stunned for a moment, but a silly smile appeared on his face. He nodded heavily. "I will always be your eldest brother." At the same time, the strangeness in Su Qingtan's heart faded away. At the same time, he felt a little ashamed. For a moment, he thought that Su Li would alienate him because of her identity. Sure enough, he thought too much. No matter how his second sister's temperament changed, as long as she didn't change in front of him, it was enough. After thinking it through, Su Qingtan opened his mind and played with Su Li for a day. He didn't leave until the evening. Ling Qinglan only gave him 1 day to rest, and he spent all his time on Su Li. "Eldest brother, be careful on the way." Su Qingtan's carriage drove away from the affiliated school of the National Academy. Su Li's gentle and cordial expression faded away. She returned to the room. Fang Yuan, who was hiding behind the screen, appeared in a flash. He frowned and said, "Su Qingtan got involved in the Yinma cult. Shall we get him out?" With the Hongyan House as an intelligence agent, the Linli building knew the situation in Yunjing City like the palm of its hand. Although everything was calm now, the Yinma cult would eventually attack the royal family. If Su Qingtan got involved, he would definitely be in danger. Su Li's eyes were slightly gloomy. All kinds of thoughts flashed through her eyes. Then she shook her head and said, "No. Qiu Xiangong is the secret of the Yinma cult. Eldest brother has practiced it, so he is the core figure of the Yinma cult. Even if Ling Li is willing to let him go, the elders of the Yinma cult will not agree." It turns out that there is such a secret. Fang Yuan's heart sank and he stopped talking. Compared with Su Li, his vision was still too narrow. Su Li worried about many things at this time, but Su Qingtan was not. The current situation was stable. With the help of Ling Qinglan, Su Qingtan was now an inborn senior. His temperament and life-saving ability had been greatly improved. It was not so easy for him to be killed. What she cared about most at the moment was the Wanjian sect. Since the auction house, the people of the Wanjian sect had disappeared. When Tingshan came back from the Qinghe province, it was unreasonable that there was no movement for such a long time. There were only 2 possibilities in this situation. The first possibility was that the people of the Wanjian sect had left and stopped chasing Wen Tingshan. But for the position of the head of the Wanjian sect, they would not easily give up. Then there was only the second possibility. They were delayed by something. Maybe someone was facing a breakthrough, or maybe they were facing greater interests. There are few forces in Yunjing City who can help to cover their tracks so well. Su Li's eyes flashed. She said, "Help me to make an appointment with Ling Li as Mr. Li. The time is tomorrow. See him." Fang Yuan was slightly shocked and his face became pale. He couldn't help but ask, "Why do you want to see him?" Su Li turned around. Her clear eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts, which made Fang Yuan inexplicably frightened. Fang Yuan wanted to explain, but he was interrupted by Su Li's cold voice. "The Wanjian sect is a great threat. If we can't find him, the Linli building will not be peaceful. The Yinma cult and the Wanjian sect used to have a bad relationship in the spiritual circle. It is a win-win situation to cooperate with the Yinma cult." Speaking of this, Su Li's eyes were complicated, and her expression was still cold. She said, "Because of my affairs, the Linli building should also respond. This is the best time for me to get rid of the relationship with Mr. Li." Fang Yuan frowned when he heard it, and then he stretched his eyebrows. There was an obscure surprise on his cold face. Although he still didn't know what Su Li wanted to do after hearing these words, it was the first time that Su Li explained the purpose of the action to him, so he was naturally happy. Soon after, Fang Yuan left in the night. Su Li looked at the dim night sky and stood in the cold wind for a moment. Then she returned to the room and continued to study the AO sword skills. Soon, the news of the Linli building came to the Ling mansion. Li's affairs happened 7 days ago, and the Linli building responded. Did Mr. Li make an appointment? Ling Li received the news and frowned deeply. This matter was full of strangeness. It was too strange. If Mr. Li intended to stand up for Su Li, he should not be so slow. But if he didn't have a deep relationship with Su Li, he should not get involved in this kind of thing, so as to avoid trouble. Ling Qinglan, who came to deliver the news, also looked dignified. He said in a deep voice, "Before, we had always been in a cooperative relationship with the Linli building. We even established a preliminary friendship with the Linli building because of the full moon and heartstrings incident. Now we rely on the Linli building for a lot of elixirs and poisons. If Mr. Li cuts off the supply, our actions are bound to be affected." Ling Li closed his eyes and rubbed his eyebrows. Then he opened his eyes again, and his eyes were shining. "Tomorrow I will be well prepared. No matter what Mr. Li does, I will take it." Chapter 262. On the lake, on the ship. It was still the place where they met last time. The difference was that Fang Yuan, who disguised himself, stood beside Su Li. At this moment, he was standing outside the ship house, side by side with Ling Mo. In the ship house, Ling Li looked at the young man in cyan who was natural on the side of the chessboard. He was slightly shocked and then chuckled. He broke the silence first. "Mr. Li, you invited me here. You don't just want to play chess, do you?" Su Li's long and narrow eyes flashed a hint of obscure complexity. She picked up a chess piece with her fingertips and said absent-mindedly, "Of course not. Hierarchling, you are busy. How dare I disturb you?" Ling Li frowned slightly and tapped on the side of the chessboard with his fingers. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Mr. Li, just say it. I haven't seen you for a long time. Hierarchling, you seem to be more irritable." Su Li judged slowly, and her smile gradually became cold. "Hierarchling, I think you can guess the purpose of my coming here today. Please give me an explanation for the attack on me by the higher-ups of your cult a few days ago." Ling Li breathed slightly and his expression changed. Sure enough, he came to seek justice for her. Su Li was his woman, but now it was a strange man's turn to seek justice for her. How ironic was it? He looked slightly pale and said coldly, "Su Li once said that you don't have a deep relationship with her. I will deal with it myself. It seems that it is not your turn to intervene as an outsider, right?" "Hierarchling, you are wrong." Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and pinched her fingertips between her knees. She pretended to be relaxed and said, "Hierarchling, you don't know. If you killed Su Li, although I have some cooperation with her, I won't stand up for her. But Su Yu, who you killed, is a member of the Linli building." Hearing this, Ling Li's expression changed instantly. Su Yu, Su Li's aunt, turned out to be a member of the Linli building. Su Yu is at the peak of the inborn realm. She is a great fighting force of the Linli building. Not only that, her husband is also a member of me, and he is a senior in the inborn 8th hurdle. After Su Yu's death, her husband also disappeared. You made the Linli building lose 2 fighters of the inborn realm. How should we settle this account? Su Li's words shocked Ling Li and made him completely speechless. In this way, after Li's aunt died, her uncle also left her. Would she be wronged? Ling Li gently spat out a mouthful of turbid air. He nodded and lowered his eyes. A touch of pain emerged. If he had noticed Ling Xian's abnormality earlier, all this would not have happened. It was the result of his negligence. No matter how Su Li blamed and hated him, it was not an exaggeration. At the moment when he raised his head, Ling Li's expression had returned to normal. He said slowly, "Our Yinma cult admits it. What compensation do you want?" A trace of surprise flashed between Su Li's eyebrows. Ling Li had always been hostile to her identity. There would be some twists and turns today. She didn't expect that he would be so easy to talk to. Sect Master is truly a straightforward person. This matter is related to the face of the Linli building. If we don't make some compensation, we will be regarded as weak. My request is not much, only 2. First, I originally wanted sect leader to hand over the murderer, but after my investigation, I found that there was no need to hand over the murderer. Compensate the Linli building with 100 Wudao stones. As soon as the words came out, the third elder standing behind Ling Li immediately frowned. 100 Wudao stones were too much. The value of the full moon and heartstrings auctioned in Yunjing City was no more than 10 Wudao stones. Mr. Li asked for 100 Wudao stones. It was an exorbitant demand. Sure enough, Ling Li couldn't help but frown when he heard this. 100 Wudao stones are too much. Even if our Yinma cult takes out so many at once, the foundation will be shaken. I can only give you 50 at most. This is the limit that I can decide. Su Li's eyes flashed and she gently nodded. I don't know the wealth of your spiritual circle. So, 50 is okay. Seeing that Su Li agreed, Ling Li secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but he had doubts in his heart. Your spiritual circle? Was Mr. Li not a person of the spiritual circle? Were there other cultivation circles besides the spiritual circle? The details of this person were a mystery, and it had been impossible to find out. But what he said might be a deliberate decoy, so he couldn't be easily believed. Thinking of this, Ling Li got rid of distracting thoughts and continued to say, What's the second request? Su Li raised the corner of her mouth and smiled mysteriously. The second request is not so much a request, but I want to cooperate with you again. Cooperation? Ling Li was puzzled. Now the Yinma cult and the Lin Li building had no common interests. What else could they cooperate with? I remember that your Yinma cult has always been at odds with the Wanjian sect in the spiritual circle, right? Su Li said bluntly with her eyes shining. The relationship between the Yinma cult and the Wanjian sect was told by Ling Li himself, and then confirmed by Wen Tingshan. Now it became a tool in her hands to decoy. Ling Li's body shook slightly, and he said meaningfully, Mr. Li is really resourceful. You even know the news of the spiritual circle clearly. Su Li chuckled and said indifferently, It was not a secret in the spiritual circle decades ago. It is not difficult for me to know it. And I also know that a group of people of the Wanjian sect has been staying in Yunjing City in recent months. But they are good at hiding, so they haven't left any traces. It seems that the cooperation you are going to propose has something to do with the Wanjian sect. Ling Li's tone was full of doubts, but he was more sure. Su Li nodded and said, To be honest, the Lin Li building and the Wanjian sect also have some grievances. I will not be at peace if I don't find out those rats. Why don't you and I cooperate to investigate and find them out as soon as possible? Such cooperation is what the Yinma cult is looking forward to. Ling Li's eyes flickered. What do you want to do after finding out the people of the Wanjian sect? Su Li didn't hesitate and replied with a smile. It's good if we can catch them alive. But if we can't catch them, we can only kill them. Ling Li took a deep look at Su Li, who was smiling. After thinking for a moment, he nodded and said, Such cooperation is what the Yinma cult is looking forward to. Later, I will send Xinghu to contact the Lin Li building and share intelligence. That's good. Since it's settled, I won't stay here any longer. Goodbye. Su Li stood up and smiled with her hands folded. Then she turned around and left without any hesitation. Ling Li frowned when he saw Su Li leave. He thought that Mr. Li came to denounce him, but when they met, the so-called apology was just a formality. He was afraid that even if he reduced the number of Wudao stones to 10, Mr. Li would also agree. The real purpose was for the Wanjian sect. Hierarch, since Mr. Li is also hostile to the Wanjian sect, maybe we can cooperate with him to kill our way to the spiritual circle. The third elder's voice suddenly sounded, and his eyes were full of light. Mr. Li is extremely not simple. Even I feel a faint sense of danger when facing him. If there is no accident, his cultivation must reach the level of the longevity realm. The longevity realm can only be broken through in the spiritual circle, and he is also inextricably linked with the spiritual circle. Ling Li thought quickly, but then he shook his head and said slowly, It's hard to say everything based on this person's words. The Wanjian sect has been in chaos in recent years. Now a small group of people inexplicably appeared in Yunjing City, and the Lin Li building hurried to deal with them. It's hard to say the relationship between them and the Wanjian sect. The third elder's face changed slightly. You mean? Ling Li waved his hand to stop the third elder from continuing. It's just my guess. We have to find the people of the Wanjian sect to decide the specific situation. Hierarch is wise. The third elder bowed his head and complimented. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Although his cultivation was at the peak, he was still far behind the hierarch in terms of quick thinking. With Ling Qinglan's help, the Yinma cult couldn't restore its prosperity in the past. Old ancestor has found the right successor. The third elder thought of Su Li again. Now he knew that Su Li, who was almost killed by Ling Xian that day, was the masked woman in the Tang mansion. At that time, he thought that the woman was just an ordinary person. Later, when they met in the alley, he knew that Su Li was good at hiding. Her cultivation was not inferior to that of the hierarch. She was decisive in killing and quick in thinking. If such an amazing woman married the hierarch, it would be a good story. Unfortunately, the third elder shook his head and sighed. It was too late to say anything now. The Yinma cult and the Linli building, the two secret forces in Yunjing City, joined hands. Yunjing City seemed to be peaceful, but in fact, it was turbulent. Spies of the two forces were everywhere. They searched for the whereabouts of the people of the Wanjian sect inch by inch. Even Su Qingtan also participated in it. He was responsible for the exploration of a small area. Ling Qinglan was very busy, not only because of the Yinma cult, but also because of the trifles of the Supreme Judiciary. He was busy until late at night every day. On the one hand, he couldn't stand Mrs. Gu's repeated persuasion. On the other hand, for the sake of the Yinma cult, he now lived in the Ling mansion and didn't care about the third prince deliberately. After the auction house, the first prince and the third prince almost lost favor at the same time. They were put under house arrest by Dongfang Xiao and couldn't go out. Now the fifth prince was the most prestigious one in the royal family. That night, Ling Qinglan finished his business and returned to the Ling mansion alone. The night was as cold as water. The cold street under the moonlight looked bright. Ling Qinglan's shadow was long. He walked around the last corner and saw the gate of the Ling mansion. The lanterns on both sides of the gate had not been extinguished yet. Ling Qinglan felt warm and smiled. He knew that Aunt Qiumeng specially left the lanterns for him. At this moment, crack. Chapter 263. In the dim night, a beautiful woman in plain white clothes came into Ling Qinglan's eyes. She looked a little nervous and her eyes were extremely bright. She was looking at him with a very strange look. Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows and walked to her. He said softly, "It's late at night. It's not peaceful in Yunjing City. What are you doing here alone?" Then, the beautiful woman didn't answer. She just looked at him blankly. It seemed that she was stunned. Ling Qinglan felt more and more strange. He looked at her carefully and his expression changed slightly. He recognized her. Wasn't she the former top girl of the Hongyan house, Chu Lu? Usually, Chu Lu was seductive with heavy makeup in the brothel. But now she changed her face. He almost didn't recognize her. However, after the auction fair, the woman's identity had been exposed. She was the Xiangzhu of the Hehuan sect. Why did she suddenly appear here tonight? Thinking of this, Ling Qinglan smiled and tentatively said, "Why do you come here so late at night?" Chu Lu was slightly shocked. But when she thought of the warning of the Linli building, her heart sank slightly. She took a deep breath and said nervously, "Ling Qinglan's expression changed dramatically. He knocked Chu Lu out and took her to the east courtyard of the Ling mansion. After a breeze, there were two more people in the east courtyard. Ling Mo saw Ling Qinglan holding a woman. He couldn't help but feel strange. Ling Li also frowned and asked, "Don't get me wrong. This woman actually knows my real identity, so I brought her back." Ling Qinglan explained and put Chu Lu down. There was a trace of doubt in his heart. This woman clearly had the cultivation of the acquired ninth hurdle. If she wanted to escape from him, although it was not troublesome, it would take some effort. But just now, the woman didn't struggle at all, as if she knew that he wouldn't hurt her. Could it be, is she an old friend? Ling Qinglan's eyes changed. He stared at Chu Lu's face, but he couldn't find any connection between her and him. You can interrogate this person. Since she can recognize you, Maybe she knows more detailed information about the destruction of the Yi family. Ling Li said lightly. He stood up and said, I have to prepare the Wudao stone. This study is for you temporarily. Lingimo, let's go. Ling Li left the study without saying anything. Ling Qinglan was stunned for a moment. He shook his head and laughed. After Su Li's affair, Ling Li was more decisive than before. Cough, cough. Chu Lu, who was lying on the rotten chair, coughed and opened her eyes blankly. She saw that she was in the same room with Ling Qinglan and there was no one else. She was relieved and looked at Ling Qinglan's face with a trace of nostalgia and fascination. Ling Qinglan snorted uncomfortably and said indifferently, Miss, there are only you and me here. You don't have to play dumb. Tell me, who told you my real name? Chu Lu trembled and was surprised. But when she heard Ling Qinglan's question, tears appeared in her eyes. She murmured, Oh, you are really Mo. Do you remember you have an elder sister? Sister? When Ling Qinglan heard this, he was shocked, but he was still unmoved on the surface. He shouted coldly, Nonsense! I'm the only son in the Yi family. How can I have an elder sister? If you still talk nonsense, don't blame me for being merciless and torturing you. Hearing Ling Qinglan's cold words, Chu Lu was completely panicked. Was it because the tragedy of that year had such a great impact on him that he completely forgot her? No, how could he forget me? I am your sister Shui. Chu Lu couldn't believe it. She couldn't help but step forward and hug Ling Qinglan's back. Her tears were like broken beads. She said, Did you forget the agreement by the lake on that snowy night? As soon as she finished her words, Chu Lu felt that her shoulders were suddenly pinched. She looked up blankly and found that Ling Qinglan had turned around and looked at her with surprise. His cold expression had long melted and was as soft as spring water. Sister Shui, it's really you. Chu Lu stared at Ling Qinglan blankly. After a long time, she finally burst into laughter. She wiped her tears and said with grievance, Little brother, I haven't seen you for so many years. You even want to test your elder sister. Ling Qinglan was ashamed and said, I don't want to. But now the situation in Yunjing City is unclear. I can only do this. Only you and I know the agreement between you and me. Even if you are not Sister Shui, you must be someone very close to her. So, I can feel relieved to recognize you. Chu Lu touched her face and sighed softly, There is a reason why I look like this. No wonder you don't dare to recognize me. Sister Shui, why do you have a relationship with the people of the Hahuan sect? Ling Qinglan frowned and couldn't help but ask. Chu Lu stared at Ling Qinglan, who was already good-looking. She immediately smiled slightly. She told him everything about her experience in the Hahuan sect. As for her encounter with Mr. Li, she didn't mention anything. Damn it. The old witch Yi Tian is so vicious. She learned the secret skill to kill others and treat you like this. I'm going to get even with her. Ling Qinglan's eyes were red and he was furious. He couldn't wait to rush to the nest of the Hahuan sect and kill Yi Tian. Chu Lu quickly held Ling Qinglan and comforted him, Don't. Although the Yinma cult is powerful, the Hahuan sect is also a big sect. If you rashly kill the Hahuan sect, you will expose yourself and give the royal family a chance. Besides, the Hongchen powder in my body has been detoxified. I have escaped from the Hongyan house. In the future, the people of the Hahuan sect will not find me. The gentle voice of his sister was like the murmur of a brook. It soothed Ling Qinglan's violent mood. He took a deep breath and calmed down. His eyes flashed with wisdom. Sister Shui, it is said that the Hongchen powder is incurable. How did you get rid of the control of the Hahuan sect? Ling Qinglan was puzzled. Although he no longer doubted Chu Lu's identity, how could his sister suddenly escape after being trapped in the Hahuan sect for 9 years with her ability? Hearing that, Chu Lu was slightly shocked. She unconsciously thought of Su Li's order. Although the Linli building cooperates with the Yinma cult, we have some unpleasantness recently. Our relationship is not the same as before. If you dare to reveal any information about the Linli building, don't blame me for being ruthless. Mr. Li had always been mysterious. If he was ruthless, what would he do? Chu Lu thought of the first time she met Su Li. Every time she made a move secretly and every time she probed, she was defeated. She couldn't help but shudder. Such a person was usually kind. But if she violated the agreement, the Mr. Li would be ruthless. The consequences would be unimaginable. Sister Shui, what are you thinking? Why are you sweating? Ling Qinglan took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat for Chu Lu. Chu Lu came back to herself with fear. She forced a smile and whispered, Xiaoma, although I want to tell you everything, I have an agreement with the person who saved me. I can't reveal any information about him. I can only tell you that I seized the opportunity at the auction at the end of last year and successfully escaped from the sight of the Hehuan sect. Then we can meet. Ling Qinglan frowned. Chu Lu's words were very straightforward. It was not appropriate for him to continue to ask. The mysterious person who helped him secretly could find out his real identity and the identity of the Yinma cult. It was extremely difficult. Sister Shui, you are tired. Let me help you to have a rest. I will arrange your identity well. They left the study and came to the courtyard where Ling Qinglan lived. Chu Lu smiled slightly and reached out to smooth Ling Qinglan's eyebrows. She said softly, You don't have to worry about me. I have endured for 9 years. Now I will be more careful when I meet you. The senior taught me the secret skill of disguise. I will disguise myself and follow you. Then, Chu Lu didn't say anything more. She turned around and walked into the room. Ling Qinglan's heart sank. Who was helping Sister Shui? The person even taught her the secret skill of disguise, which was rare in the martial arts circle. After thinking for a moment, Ling Qinglan subconsciously thought of a person. Could it be him? Ling Qinglan slightly pursed his lips. His life was saved by him. Now, if his sister came back because of him, he really didn't know how to repay such a great kindness. Even if he could detoxify the Hongshan powder, he must pay a big price. After thinking about it, Ling Qinglan shook his head and sighed. Everything was his guess. Since Sister Shui didn't want to say it, he couldn't force her. It was lucky that she came back safely. There was no need to get to the bottom of it. After the disturbance of Chu Lu, a few days later, Su Li received a message from Fang Yuan every day. She was more and more awestruck. She had cooperated with the Yinma cult. The two forces worked together to find the Wanjian sect, but they didn't find any trace. It's impossible. Unless the Wanjian sect has cooperated with the local forces in Yunjing City and hid in a place that we can't find. Fang Yuan analyzed in a low voice. Obviously, he also noticed the abnormality. If so, don't waste your effort. Su Li's eyes flashed. She thought for a moment and suddenly said, You go to contact someone. What? Fang Yuan was stunned and raised his head in surprise. Did Su Li have a backup plan in the dark? On the second day, Fang Yuan, who disguised himself, sat on the second floor of an unknown tea house. He slowly drank tea and silently counted the time. After a while, a man in bamboo hat suddenly sat down in front of him. Without saying anything, he picked up the wine and drank it. Then he tapped the table with his fingers. Hearty! Fang Yuan smiled and replied, It's to drink together. The man in bamboo hat immediately lowered his head and whispered, Protector Fang, I pay my respects. Is there anything unusual in the royal family? Fang Yuan came straight to the point. Obviously, he trusted the man in bamboo hat very much. If he lifted the bamboo hat, he would find that the man was Dong Fang He, who was captured at the auction that day. Several months later, the effect of the secret skill on Dong Fang He didn't weaken, but became more powerful. He was completely loyal to Su Li and even had more members to inquire for information for Su Li. All the shameful information in the Shisan Institute of the Imperial Palace was passed to Su Li through Dong Fang He. Hearing Fang Yuan's question, Dong Fang He immediately told him in detail what happened recently. Chapter 264. At noon, it was the busiest time in Yunjing City. The Linli building was bustling with customers and the business was much better than before. Sir, please come in. Sir, what would you like to order today? Yin Xuetong and Mei Ruhan were busy collecting money and keeping accounts at the table. Suddenly, the light at the door dimmed. They looked at the door at the same time and were shocked when they saw the man's dress. Fang Yuan? Fang Yuan didn't disguise himself. How could he come in from the front door? What happened? Yin Xuedong felt something was wrong and immediately called Chu Qingning. Hey, sir, please come in. Chu Qingning pretended to be enthusiastic and took Fang Yuan, who looked gloomy, directly upstairs. Others didn't find anything strange. In the room, Chu Qingning poured a cup of tea for Fang Yuan and couldn't help asking, "Didn't you go to see the spy of the royal family? Why did you come in from the front door and look so gloomy? Is there any clue about the Wanjian sect?" Fang Yuan took a breath and calmed down for a moment. He said, "There is no news about the Wanjian sect, but Dongfang he sent another important news. Dongfang Xiao is going to bestow a marriage." Chu Qingning was confused and repeated subconsciously, "Bestow a marriage?" He was stunned for a moment and looked at Fang Yuan's gloomy face. Suddenly his expression changed slightly and he was terrified. "Is it?" Chu Qingning stared at Fang Yuan and found that Fang Yuan tacitly agreed with his guess. He couldn't help but be shocked and paced around hurriedly. "How could it be? I'm going to find Su Li." After a while, Su Li came to the Linli building after receiving the urgent tip-off. After listening to Fang Yuan's low voice, she slightly raised her eyebrows and said calmly, "You mean that Dongfang Xiao will bestow a marriage to me?" Fang Yuan couldn't hide his anxiety and concern in his eyes. He quickly explained, "According to Dongfang Xiao wants you to marry Ma Jintian for the benefit of the Dongfang family. The imperial edict is being drawn up. I'm afraid that there will be news in a few days. Ma Jintian doesn't deserve you. Dongfang Xiao has no right to decide who you will marry." In the end, Fang Yuan was furious, and his cold face was slightly red. Su Li was always as calm as water, and there was no change on her face. Her eyes flickered slightly and she said lightly, "It's not as simple as you think. Dongfang Xiao was scheming. If he suddenly attacked, he must have something to ask for. I need to think about it carefully before making a decision." Su Li, Fang Yuan still wanted to say something, but Su Li suddenly turned around and said coldly, "Your mind is in a mess. You'd better go to have a rest first." Fang Yuan was slightly shocked, as if he was poured a bucket of cold water on his head. His red eyes became clear, and he immediately looked at Su Li with more complicated eyes. "Why?" "It's clearly related to your life's happiness, but you're not anxious at all. Have you never thought about your life from beginning to end? Never considered you take care to rest?" All kinds of thoughts came to his mouth, but became a meaningless concern. Fang Yuan sighed and turned to leave the attic. Su Li, who was meditating, didn't look back. Naturally, she did not see how lonely his back was. The room was quiet. Su Li touched her wrist, and her expression was slightly cold. At this time, if she was given more time to master enough force, she would not be so passive. Unfortunately, God always seemed to be against her. Dongfang Xiao suddenly attacked. There were many coincidences, but there must be inevitability in accidents. The power in my father's hands can actually make that old guy afraid. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. Although the private troops in Dongfang Rui's hands were excellent, they were not many. They were far inferior to the royal guards. What Dongfang Xiao feared was the sudden appearance of the Yunj guards. Was it because he didn't know the layout of the Yunj guards that the old guy feared and then tested? Thinking of this, Su Li took a light breath. She could imagine how furious Dongfang Rui would be after the imperial edict was issued. If he was pushed to the extreme, he might only have one way to go, raising troops to rebel. But once it developed into that situation, Dongfang Xiao would directly use the imperial power to eradicate Dongfang Rui. She would never allow such an ending to happen. The Ma family has always been the most loyal lackey of the Dongfang family. So, Dongfang Xiao chose Ma Jintian. If I marry into the Ma family, my father can only listen to Dongfang Xiao for fear of harming the innocent. Dongfang Xiao's soldiers can defeat all obstacles for his son without bloodshed. Su Li thought quickly. As a person who had lived 2 lives, she knew the situation of Yunjing City better than anyone else. But just because of this, she knew that no matter Lord Rui's mansion, the Linli building or the Yinma cult, she couldn't act rashly. In the previous life, the Yinma cult developed longer and was more powerful. but it was destroyed eventually. If she didn't figure out the reason, she couldn't do anything. So, how can I solve this situation? Su Li stood attentively. She began to think about the solution. She couldn't marry into the Ma family and let Dongfang Xiao succeed. If Ma Jintian died, this idea just came up, but it was immediately rejected by Su Li. It didn't matter if Ma Jintian died. He was not the only choice. There were many young talents in Yunjing City. Dongfang Xiao could be replaced by Wu Jin or any other family that was not a threat to Dongfang Xiao. She couldn't kill all the young talents in Yunjing City. If I can't kill him, there is only one way. Su Li's clear eyes flashed a vague light. No one knew what decision she would make tonight. After a while, Su Li left the Linli building alone. When Fang Yuan wanted to follow her, it was too late. He even couldn't see her. It was a quiet night. The next day, it was quite peaceful. There was no news from the Imperial Palace. Fang Yuan waited anxiously for half a day. Finally, he received Su Li's order. He opened the note, and his expression immediately eased. He smiled slightly. Without saying anything, he went out with his servants to do something. In the streets of Yunjing City, a rumor gradually spread. It became more and more fierce under the promotion of some people. It was said like it was true. Have you heard? The child of Prime Minister Ma, that is Master Ma. He is impotent. Really? Of course. I heard from the girls in the brothel that Master Ma was overindulged in debauchery. His lower body was impotent. Tut-tut. These childs really don't know how to control themselves. Ma Jintian is not 18 years old yet, right? At the beginning, only 1 or 2 people talked about it. Later, it became a secret that everyone in Yunjing City knew. The more it spread, the more unbelievable it became. Some people said that Ma Jintian had sex with more than 10 girls in one night. That was why he got sick. Some people even said that they saw Ma Jintian lose his temper with their own eyes. The rumor was true. In just one day, almost everyone knew that Ma Jintian was impotent. It was a hot topic in Yunjing City. At this moment, Ma Jintian listened to his father's scolding in the Ma mansion. He was confused. Dad, don't you know my temperament? I'm not a playboy like Lingli. How can I go out to fool around? Ma Jintian's face was red. He was so angry that he roared, "It is even more impossible that he is impotent. Which bastard slandered me like this?" In Mada's eyes, Zhang Tai's reaction was a little angry out of humiliation. He stared at his son and asked seriously, "Jin, is what you said true?" Seeing that his father still doubted him, Ma Jintian was so angry that he was about to die. He nodded helplessly and said, "It's true. Dad, every word I said is true. It is truer than gold." "Well, you don't need to say anything. I believe you." Mada waved his hand and said, "You can leave now. I will help you to deal with it." Ma Jintian had no choice but to leave. When he turned around, he looked ferocious. He almost gnashed his teeth. He really wanted to tear the bastard who spread the rumor into pieces. It was a great shame for him to do that. "Bastard, don't let me catch you." Ma Jintian scolded him with hatred. Then he flung his sleeves and left with a long face. Seeing his son leave, Mada's expression instantly turned gloomy, and his heart began to pound. How could it be so coincidental? The imperial palace was about to issue the imperial edict, but Jintian had such a thing. If the emperor misunderstood the loyalty of the Ma family, it would be bad. Mada asked Ma Jintian several times, but he didn't reveal any flaws even though he was furious. Either Ma Jintian didn't know and was set up, or he didn't want to marry Su Li. Thinking of this, Mada sighed deeply and sat down with the help of the table. No matter which possibility it was, the status of the Ma family in Dongfang Zhao's heart would be lowered. "Butler, prepare the sedan chair to go to the imperial palace." Mada put on his official uniform and went out in a hurry. Even if it was not Ma Jintian who bestowed the marriage, he had to be polite. Otherwise, the Ma family would be in danger because of Dongfang Zhao's suspicion. At this moment, in the imperial study in the imperial palace, Dongfang Zhao paced and suddenly smiled, So, now the whole city is full of the rumor about the boy of the Ma family. The imperial edict that I carefully prepared is useless? Eunuch Feng, who was bowing and standing aside, slightly changed his expression. He immediately knelt down and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please calm down. It may be a coincidence." Coincidence? Dongfang Shao sneered and said, "I really hope that it is a coincidence, otherwise." Eunuch Feng was slightly shocked. He quickly bowed his head and kowtowed, "Your Majesty, I am loyal and devoted. I didn't tell anyone except Lord Ma, who already knows that you are going to bestow the marriage. If it was you who leaked the secret, do you think you can still talk to me here?" Eunuch Feng trembled slightly and didn't dare to say anything more. Useless thing. Dongfang Shao cursed and turned around with a gloomy face. But at this moment, a eunuch passed a message from outside the study, "Your Majesty, Lord Ma asks to see you." Speaking of the devil has arrived. What a coincidence, hee hee. Chapter 265. After a while, Mada, who was outside the imperial study, received the notice. He immediately stepped into the door and hurried in. When he turned around, he saw Eunuch Feng kneeling on the ground. He couldn't help but feel shocked. He quickly bowed and knelt beside Eunuch Feng. "Your Majesty! Long live your Majesty!" Dongfang Shao slightly opened his eyes and looked at Mada, who was kneeling on the ground for a moment. He suddenly said softly, "Long live your Majesty? I think you can't wait for me to die of anger now." Hearing this, Mada was shocked. He raised his head and said excitedly, "Your Majesty, why do you say that? This old official is loyal to your Majesty and the heavens can prove it. I am willing to sacrifice my life for your Majesty and die for you. Your Majesty, if you don't believe me, That's enough." Dongfang Shao waved his hand impatiently to stop Mada's show. He asked calmly, "Tell me, what's going on with your son?" Mada wiped his cold sweat and thought that he finally got over the difficulty. He thought of Ma Jintian's reaction and couldn't help but frown. "I can guarantee with my life that only I know that your Majesty wants to grant a marriage. You didn't tell my son. Now Yunjing City is full of gossip because of my son. Someone must be deliberately playing tricks." Deliberately playing tricks? Dongfang Shao thought for a while and then shook his head slightly. "No matter how the news is leaked, the person has achieved his goal. Since the boy can't marry my niece, you two tell me which boy is a good match for my niece?" This, Eunuch Feng was thinking. Although Mada was disappointed, he didn't dare to show his emotion. He tried his best to solve the problem for Dongfang Shao. After a while, Eunuch Feng said first, "Your Majesty, how about the first child of the Minister of the Ministry of Rights? He is handsome." Before Eunuch Feng finished his words, he was interrupted by Dongfang Shao impatiently and scolded, "Idiot! The Minister of the Ministry of Rights is 24 years old and has 3 wives. Su Li is my niece and the princess of the Dahan country. Do you want me to be reviled for thousands of years by letting her marry him?" Eunuch Feng trembled and kept kowtowing, "I dare not." Dongfang Shao stood up and turned around. He flicked Eunuch Feng's face with his sleeves and said, "Listen carefully. I'm choosing a husband for the princess of the Dahan country. How can it be a joke? If he couldn't find a family of equal status, wouldn't he be a joke to others? Our imperial family can't afford to lose this face. If you can't think of anyone, then kneel until you think of someone." Dongfang Shao said and left the imperial study. Hearing the footsteps getting farther and farther, Mada and Eunuch Feng looked at each other and sighed. They both saw the fear and helplessness in each other's eyes. Obviously, Dongfang Shao vented his anger on them because of Ma Jintian. "Eunuch Feng, do you know why His Majesty suddenly decreed a marriage?" Mada could not help but ask after everyone in the imperial study had left. "There are many young talents in Yunjing City. If your Majesty really wants to grant a marriage to the little princess, there are many people who are well-matched." Eunuch Feng reminded Mada in a low voice. Then he looked around and said in a lower voice, "His Majesty must have a very special purpose. We should figure it out carefully." Mada's heart trembled slightly. He thought of many things in an instant, but how could he dare to say such a disgraceful thing? If this was just His Majesty's test of him, and he really acted too smart, perhaps His Majesty's next target would be him. Mada wiped the fine sweat on his forehead and showed a trace of embarrassment in his slightly turbid eyes. Eunuch Feng knelt beside Mada calmly and didn't continue to remind Mada. His words were explicit enough. He knew His Majesty's mind very well, but he couldn't live a better life if he didn't know. He deliberately mentioned the son of the Minister of the Ministry of Rights just to protect himself. This time he knelt here because of Mada. His Majesty really wanted to ask Mada, not him. If he said a suitable candidate, His Majesty would be more unhappy. In the quiet imperial study, Mada's heavy breathing became more and more harsh. Sweat gathered on the ground under his forehead. It could be seen that his mind was fluctuating violently. Lord Ma. Suddenly, a vague sound came into Ma Jintian's ears. Ma Jintian was slightly shocked. When he was about to speak, the voice came again. Don't make it public. I just can't bear to see His Majesty continue to kneel, so I come to remind him. His Majesty just needs to listen and don't say. Mada was surprised. He didn't expose the voice. Although he suspected that the owner of the voice was the one who leaked the information, he didn't have the confidence to deal with the aftermath well. Besides, he really needed this person's reminder to get through the difficulties. As for whether he was used or not, it had to wait until he successfully got rid of Dongfang Zhao's suspicion. The person His Majesty wants to find must meet 3 requirements. 3 requirements. Mada was shocked. There were actually 3 requirements. First, the person must be well matched in social status. The person whom His Majesty wants to marry must be someone that all the civil and military officials in the imperial court can't find any flaws. At least, his status is not lower than that of His Majesty. Second, the person's family is either like Lord Ma, who completely works for the Dongfang family, or he is just a paper tiger with a status but no real power. It is easier for His Majesty to deal with him. Third, the person must be someone that His Majesty doesn't like. It is better to make His Majesty resist, and then let 8th Lord. In this way, Lord Ma, do you understand? Hearing this, Mada was suddenly enlightened, and then he was shocked. Sure enough, His Majesty couldn't help but fight with 8th Lord. In order to deal with 8th Lord, His Majesty made such a detour. It was really hard to guess the Emperor's heart. However, who was the person who reminded him just now? He could understand His Majesty's thoughts and transmit the sound in the palace. Was it possible that he was not the initiator of the information leak, but a member of the Dongfang family? Did His Majesty send him to remind me? Mada was confused, but he also knew that he could only bury this doubt in his heart so as not to cause trouble for himself. Anyway, after the mysterious person reminded me, I have a suitable candidate. Mada thought. He didn't need to investigate the news about Su Li. Everything that happened around the first beauty in Yunjing City would be spread by people. For example, the school of the affiliated school that caused a stir a few months ago. Thinking of this, Mada smiled confidently and said to Eunuch Feng, who was kneeling beside him, Eunuch Feng, you are really tired this time. I have already thought of a suitable candidate. Eunuch Feng was a little surprised and amazed. After a short time, Mada thought of a perfect plan. It seemed that Mada's mind was much more powerful than he thought. Soon, Eunuch Feng invited Dongfang Zhao. Eunuch Feng told me that you have already thought of a suitable candidate. Tell me. Dongfang Zhao waved his sleeves and sat down. He looked dignified and looked at Mada, who was humble and respectful. Your Majesty. Mada got up and bowed to salute. I think the 3rd child of the Ling General's mansion is the most suitable candidate. Dongfang Zhao was surprised and his tone became gentle. Why do you say so? Mada knew that there was a chance and quickly said, in terms of background, the 3rd child of the Ling family, Ling Li's whole family is loyal and brave. Besides, there is a heroine like Mrs. Gu. Ling Li's identity is completely worthy of the princess. Besides, I have heard that the 3rd child of the Ling family is very fond of Su Li. Although he was rejected by the princess in the end, Everything depends on human effort. If your majesty grants the marriage, it may be a blessing and solve the marriage problem of the Ling family. Isn't it killing two birds with one stone? Dongfang Xiao smiled but pretended to be sad and sighed. Indeed, Ling Li is ignorant and incompetent. Mrs. Gu has come to me for help more than once. Now the prodigal son has turned over a new leaf. If my niece is willing to marry him, it is not a bad thing. Unfortunately, I don't know if the eighth brother is willing. Mada was overjoyed and immediately followed Dongfang Zhao's words and said shamelessly, "Your Majesty, don't worry. You are the ruler of the country and the elder brother of the eighth lord. The elder brother is the father. It is a great kindness for him to choose a good husband for the princess. How can the eighth lord refuse?" "Ha ha ha," Dongfang Xiao heard the words and laughed out loud. "You are right. I think too much." Eunuch Feng immediately orders someone to draft the imperial edict. "Ma, please go to the Lord Rue's mansion to read the imperial edict later. I hope the eighth brother can understand my painstaking efforts." "Your Majesty, is it inappropriate for me to read the imperial edict?" "It is always." Mada looked a little embarrassed and looked at Eunuch Feng, who stood aside. It was okay that Dongfang Xiao wanted to deal with Lord Rue, but he even wanted him to be a pawn. "But you don't want to?" Dongfang Xiao raised his eyelids and exuded a sense of danger. Mada was shocked and immediately saluted respectfully, "Yes, Your Majesty." At the same time, Mada smiled bitterly in his heart. He was in a dilemma. If he didn't agree, Dongfang Xiao would punish him. Until he left the imperial study in a daze, he didn't know what he did to make Dongfang Xiao suspect him. "I made a wrong choice in the past." In the clear sky outside the imperial study, Mada exhaled a breath of turbid air. Dongfang Xiao was not a good ruler, but he couldn't hang on to a tree. After Mada left, Eunuch Feng stood beside Dongfang Xiao with a puzzled face. He really wondered why Mada was still punished even though he did as Dongfang Xiao said. Dongfang Xiao snorted and woke him up. "Send someone to watch Mada. Don't you think it's too fast to figure out my mind in just 1 hour? Being fast might also be a kind of flaw." Eunuch Feng was shocked and quickly lowered his head. "I will arrange it now." The next day. Chapter 266. In the Lord Rue's mansion, Mada came with the imperial edict. Led by Dongfang Rui, all the people in the Lord Rue's mansion knelt down. Mada glanced at Dongfang Rui with pity, who had lowered his head. He opened the imperial edict and said loudly, "By the will of heaven, the emperor decreed, Su Li, the daughter of Prince Dongfang Rui, is virtuous and beautiful. I am very pleased. Now the third son of the Prince of North is young and suitable for marriage. He should choose a good girl as his wife. Su Li is unmarried and is a perfect match for the third son of the Prince of North. In order to fulfill her wish, I will betroth you to Jun Wang as his wife. The Ministry of Rites will arrange the wedding and choose an auspicious day." "That's it." "What? My brother betroth her to Ling Li of the Ling family?" Dongfang Rui was shocked and stood up from the ground. He couldn't believe it. Li was the most talented girl in the capital. How could my brother betroth her to Ling Li, who was ignorant and incompetent? "Lord Rui, I know that Princess Li has been living in the affiliated school of the National Academy. You can accept the edict for her." Mada had a kind smile on his face, but his eyes were very cold. As long as Dongfang Rui dared to refuse, Dongfang Xiao would definitely kill him. His contact with Lord Rui was monitored. He couldn't have anything to do with Dongfang Rui. Dongfang Rui looked pale. He looked at the golden silk paper in Mada's hand and didn't take it. At this moment, he knew what Su Li meant when she came back to remind him yesterday. "No matter what the emperor wants, Dad, just promise him. Don't disobey him." Li could know the action of the emperor brother one step in advance and make countermeasures. How did she do it? Originally, Dongfang Rui thought that even if Su Li hid some secrets, it was just a name to deal with people of the Su family. Until now, he found that he didn't know his daughter at all. Her ability to spy on information was no less than that of some hidden forces in Yunjing City. Lord Rui? Mada's voice came into Dongfang Rui's ears. Dongfang Rui suddenly came to himself. Mada was not as kind as before, and his words were quite aggressive. He said, "Lord Rui, you don't want to accept the imperial edict. Do you want to disobey the imperial edict?" Dongfang Rui was shocked and immediately understood Dongfang Zhao's intention. His royal brother actually wanted to lay a hand on him? But no wonder Li asked him to accept the request unconditionally. If he refused, it would be the best excuse for Dongfang Zhao to beat him. Unfortunately, Dongfang Rui sneered in his heart. "Brother, you would never expect that Li had expected this and arranged everything in advance. If it was before, he would never agree for his daughter, but now, thinking of this, Dongfang Rui took 2 steps forward and gently took the imperial edict in Mada's shocked eyes. He said respectfully, "Your subject accepts the decree." Dongfang Rui's action was so sudden that Mada and others, who came to read the imperial edict, were all stunned. Even eunuch Feng, who was always expressionless, didn't expect it. He actually accepted the edict. Mada shivered slightly. He pointed at Dongfang Rui, who took the imperial edict, and said in a trembling voice, "Lord Rui, you have to think it over. After taking the imperial edict, Princess Li must marry into the Ling family. There is no way out. Are you really willing to do that?" Seeing Mada's reaction, Dongfang Rui was a little surprised. He immediately asked with a faint smile, "What? Lord Ma seems to be implying something?" Mada looked stiff and quickly waved his hand. He said, No, I just asked casually. Since Lord Rui accepted the imperial edict, I will go to the Ministry of Rights. This old man will make a trip to the Ministry of Rights. Thank you, Lord Ma. Take care. Dongfang Rui shouted. When Mada and others went out of the Lord Rui's mansion, the smile on his face immediately disappeared, and the hidden anxiety emerged. Wu Bin appeared at the right time and looked serious. He said, "I'm going to pick up Miss. Hurry up." Dongfang Rui waved his sleeves and said anxiously. Since Li let him agree, there must be a solution. But when Wu Bin asked Su Li, her answer made Dongfang Rui completely dumbfounded. "Are you really going to marry Ling Li?" Dongfang Rui was so shocked that he patted the table. The tea on the table was spilled everywhere. Su Li looked calm and gently nodded. She said in a calm tone, as if what she said had nothing to do with her. She said, "The emperor has issued the imperial edict. Although Ling Li is a playboy, he is not inferior to you in terms of family background. Even if this matter is spread out and causes criticism, it will not cause much trouble. Even if those ministers have objections, Dongfang Zhao is right. The ministers will not embarrass Ms. Gu. Besides, you have just accepted the imperial edict. What can I do to change it?" Every word of Su Li hit the nail on the head. Dongfang Rui's heart was cold. It turned out that there were so many twists and turns hidden in it. He didn't think of it before. "In this case, why do you want me to accept the imperial edict? Li, this is a lifelong event for you. How can the bastard of the Ling family be worthy of you? How can I explain it to your mother?" Dongfang Rui sighed bitterly. Then his eyes suddenly brightened and he said, "Li, I can let Wu Bin escort you to leave the Dahan country. As long as you are out of the control of the Dahan country, even Dongfang Zhao can punish you. Wu Bin, it's useless." Before Dongfang Rui finished his words, he was interrupted by Su Li. "Father, Dongfang Zhao is so cunning. Since he wants to deal with you, he must be well prepared. If you refuse to accept the imperial edict, the royal guards will destroy the Lord Rui's mansion within half a day. If you accept the imperial edict and let me escape, I will be caught by the royal guards before I see the gate of Yunjing. All the people in the Lord Rui's mansion are like birds in a cage at this moment. They can only act according to the imperial edict. Otherwise, they will die. Father, don't you understand?" Every word of Su Li was like a sharp sword stabbing into Dongfang Rui's chest. The latter retreated a few steps with a pale face. He thought that there was still room for turning back. It turned out that Dongfang Zhao had come to this step. "I don't want you to be wronged." Dongfang Rui grasped Su Li's hand tightly. His eyes were full of sincerity. Since Su Yu left, there was only Su Li in his life. If his life could help Su Li regain her freedom, he would not hesitate. But now even if he resisted, Su Li's ending would not be better than now. Feeling the warmth from Dongfang Rui's palm, Su Li smiled gently. She stretched out her hand to smooth the wrinkles between Dongfang Rui's eyebrows. Her voice was like a soft spring breeze blowing in Dongfang Rui's ears. "Father, it is the greatest luck for me to recognize you in this life. I don't dare to ask for more." Dongfang Rui was moved. Tears flashed in his eyes. But Su Li smiled gently. "Fortunately, I didn't kill you in this life. Let me solve all the causes and effects in the remaining time." "Father, Ling Li is not as simple as you think. In fact, the first imperial edict that Dongfang Shao made was made by Ma Jintian." Su Li smiled like a flower and gently explained, "After I influenced him several times, he became Ling Li. Speaking of it, I chose the third child of the Ling family by myself. I am willing to marry him." Hearing this, Dongfang Rui's sadness on his face turned into astonishment. He was born in the royal family and was used to intrigue. But now in front of his daughter's stratagem, he was a little brainless. Su Li had been living outside the palace all the time. She had never entered the palace. How could she influence the choice of marriage partner? "Li, what are you?" Before Dongfang Rui finished his words, he was stopped by Su Li's fingertips. Su Li showed a beautiful smile. Her eyes were as bright as the sea. She said, "Father, there are some things that I can't say. When the time is right, you will know everything. As for now, please prepare a good dowry for me." Dongfang Rui stared at Su Li in a daze. After a long silence, he finally smiled and said, "You are my only daughter. I will prepare a good dowry for you. You will get married in a grand way. You will be as good as the princess." "Thank you, father." Su Li smiled sweetly and stayed in the Lord Rui's mansion for the night. In the next few days, she lived in the Lord Rui's mansion. She was very clear about her situation. If she didn't live in the Lord Rui's mansion now, she would have fewer chances to live in the Lord Rui's mansion in the future. Dongfang Rui was completely busy. He took a lot of gold and silver jewelry for Su Li to choose every day. Although he didn't know what Su Li was planning, he chose to believe his daughter unconditionally. Right now, he could only pray that a Yun's spirit in heaven would protect their daughter from suffering and troubles. When the Lord Rui's mansion was busy preparing the dowry, the people of the Ling mansion were stunned by the sudden news. The emperor bestowed a marriage to Su Li? After Mrs. Gu and Qiu Meng received the imperial edict from eunuch Feng, they were stunned for a long time. Then Qiu Meng was ecstatic and immediately came to the east courtyard to tell Ling Li the good news. "Li, come out. Don't stay in the room. It's great news. Your grandfather bestowed a marriage to Miss Su Li, whom you like." Ling Li, who was dealing with the information of the Tianya house in the room, heard his mother's voice. He was so scared that he stuffed all the information under the table. When he just finished, he heard Qiu Meng opening the door and coming in. Where did Ling Mo go? Why didn't he stop her for a moment? Ling Li complained for a while. Then his mind returned to what Qiu Meng said. His eyes suddenly became dull because of extreme shock. He trembled and asked, "Mother, what did you say?" Qiu Meng was full of joy. She quickly spread the imperial edict in front of Ling Li. It was written clearly on the yellow silk and black characters. "Su Li and I will choose a good day to get married?" Ling Li was stunned. At this moment, he seemed to be unable to think. He thought that it was impossible for him to marry Su Li in this life. Unexpectedly, an imperial edict suddenly came from the sky. He never thought that he and Su Li would get married in such a ridiculous way. "Master!" Ling Mo rushed in with a trace of eccentricity and joy on his face. When he saw Madam was also here, he immediately swallowed his words. It seemed that Master had already known it. Chapter 267. In the imperial palace, Mada knelt on the ground, and his face almost touched the floor. He even breathed cautiously, for fear of breaking Dongfang Zhao's heart. My eighth brother didn't have any reaction and just agreed. And he even prepared the dowry by himself? You even set the date? 2 days later? There was a faint smile on Dongfang Zhao's face, but the coldness in his words was so cold that Eunuch Feng couldn't help but shiver and bend his back even more. Your Majesty, what I said is true. The Eighth Lord only hesitated for a moment and directly took the imperial edict without any other excessive reaction. Eunuch Feng was also there at that time. If I lied, I would be struck by lightning. Enough! Dongfang Zhao impatiently interrupted Mada's words. He stomped a few steps with a gloomy face. Suddenly, he picked up the memorial on the table and smashed it on Mada's head. He scolded, "Useless thing, get out of here." Mada immediately got up from the ground and said while retreating, "Your Majesty, please calm down. I'll get out now, I'll get out now." At this moment, he breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. His Majesty was willing to scold him, which meant that the Ma family could completely withdraw from the whirlpool of the situation and would not be punished again. He had been with Dongfang Zhao for many years. Although he didn't know his temperament completely, he could at least understand 70% of his thoughts. Although Dongfang Zhao was extremely angry at this time, in fact, His Majesty also knew that this time his decision was wrong. Ling Li was just the person he chose according to His Majesty's will. But now when the imperial edict came out, Lord Rui's mansion not only didn't resist, but also happily prepared the dowry. Such a development was almost beyond everyone's expectation. The situation of the royal family is getting more and more complicated. It's not easy to get involved. With this thought in mind, Mada unconsciously walked to the gate of the palace. He looked back at the majestic and spectacular main gate of the palace. He couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Then he walked away. At the same time, the imperial study of the palace was still so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling could be heard. Dongfang Zhao turned around and sat in front of the table. He gently picked up a thick roll of files, which were all about the countermeasures after Dongfang Rui raised the army to rebel. He originally thought it was quite brilliant. But now it was all waste paper. Eighth brother, oh eighth brother, you really hit it well. Even I, your brother, have underestimated you. Looking at the information of Dongfang Ru, Dongfang Zhao sneered and said, everyone thinks that you love your daughter as much as your life. But at the critical moment, you don't hesitate to sell your daughter. It's really embarrassing for me. Your Majesty, excessive anger will harm your body. It's more important to take care of your body. Before Eunuch Feng finished his words, Dongfang Zhao waved his hand to stop him. Dongfang Zhao said calmly, don't worry. I'm not that fragile. Since I have missed the opportunity, I will find another one. The marriage between eighth brother and the Ling family meant that the weak would still be weak and not worth worrying about. But this wedding banquet? Dongfang Zhao narrowed his eyes and said, if I don't see it with my own eyes, how can I be satisfied? Feng Xian. Eunuch Feng immediately stepped forward and said, I'm here. Ling Li made a mistake in the early years. Which girl did he peep at? Your Majesty, it's General Wu's daughter, Wu Xiuxiu. Summon her into the palace. The next day, there was only one day left before the wedding. The servants of Lord Rui's mansion and Ling's mansion were so busy. After several days of careful preparation, the Ling's mansion and Lord Rui's mansion were decorated in bright red. It was very festive. The decoration of the east courtyard was more grand. Except for the study, the furniture and decorations in other places were almost replaced with new ones. In the room, Ling Li wore a bright red wedding robe and sat in a wheelchair. He quietly looked at himself in the mirror. Qiu Meng, who personally tied his hair behind him, couldn't help but glance at Ling Li's pale hands. She couldn't help but laugh in her heart. This boy. It was the first time that she saw him so nervous. After so many years, Ling Li indulged in women. She even thought that Ling Li would marry 8 or 10 popular courtesans in the end. Unexpectedly, fate was so magical. This silly boy not only met his sweetheart, but also was lucky to marry her. As his mother, sometimes she couldn't help but wonder whether she was in a dream. Her son was so lucky. Thinking of this, Qiu Meng stroked a strand of Ling Li's black hair with her fingertips. Looking at the cold and serious face in the mirror, she was slightly surprised. She was used to seeing the little bastard with a crooked head. Why didn't she find that Li was so handsome. He was much more handsome than those boys in Yunjing City who claimed to be handsome. In terms of appearance, Su Li is not at a disadvantage. Qiu Meng thought secretly and sighed, "This is the last time for me to tie your hair. In the future, this job will be handed over to Su Li. You should treat her well and never let her down. Do you understand?" "Yes, mother." Ling Li agreed and smiled bitterly in his heart. Although he didn't know what was going on, there must be something fishy in it. In front of Su Yu's grave in the osmanthus forest, she clearly drew a clear line. It was good that she didn't come to seek revenge. How could she agree to marry him? All of this was probably just a play by Su Li. But even if it was just a play, even if it was all an illusion and he was deceiving himself, he was willing to cooperate with Su Li and continue to play. The groom's dress was extremely complicated. Ling Li sat for a long time. In the afternoon, Ling Ping, who was in a military uniform, returned to the Ling mansion. When he saw Ling Li, he couldn't help but tease him. "Brother Li, you look like a talented man in this dress, but your expression is not quite right. Why are you so nervous? Others may think that you are going to the battlefield." Ling Li heard the words and smiled bitterly. "Second brother, don't tease me anymore. I am nervous enough." "Brother Li, you're wrong." Ling Ping waved his hand and said seriously, "You are the son of the Ling family. You can't show fear at any time, Ping." Before Ling Ping finished his words, Qiu Meng had already walked in. She rolled her eyes at him and said, "Don't make fun of your brother. If you have the ability, find one yourself. I want to see how you can be calm." Since his mother said so, Ling Ping immediately became timid. He shrank his neck and didn't dare to say more. When Ling Li saw this scene, his heavy heart finally relaxed a little. He reluctantly showed a smile, but his expression made Ling Ping frown slightly. When Qiu Meng went out again, there were only Ling Li and Ling Ping in the room. Ling Li glanced at his mother who walked far outside the room. He took off his armor and squatted down to look at Ling Li. He said seriously, "Brother Li, I think you are not right. Tell me the truth. Is there anything you are hiding from me?" Ling Li was stunned. There were too many things he was hiding from his second brother. He didn't know which one Ling Ping was talking about, so he couldn't give a response. Ling Ping thought that Ling Li was self-abased. He couldn't help but sigh secretly. He patted the blanket covering Ling Li's legs and said, "Don't worry. I have seen countless people. Miss Su is really pure. Since she is willing to marry you, she will not dislike you." Ling Li suddenly understood and didn't know what to feel for a while. He had hidden this pair of legs from his family for 10 years. No one knew how many years he would hide it in the future. "Second brother, I understand," Ling Li answered in a low voice. Ling Ping was helpless, but he didn't continue to persuade him. Rome wasn't built in a day. Brother Li's legs had been disabled for so many years. If he could still maintain his confidence, it would be really strange. After seeing his brother, Ling Ping went back to the room and changed into a suit of casual clothes. He immediately came out to help Qiu Meng decorate. He came back for two purposes. One was to act as a facade for his brother, and the other was, the border of Nanjiang country is restless. Maybe I have to go to war immediately after Brother Li gets married. I'd better tell my family after Brother Li gets married. Ling Ping shook his head to dispel distracting thoughts. He had been to the battlefield many times. Now his brother's marriage was the most important thing. Other things were not in his consideration. At night, Ling Li lay on the bed, tossing and turning. He couldn't sleep at all. In the middle of the night, all the people in the Ling mansion fell into a deep sleep. Ling Li got up from the bed and opened the secret compartment under the wardrobe. A set of black clothes came into view. But before he could take off the wedding robe, he was stopped by a pair of hands. "Master, Madam has told me that it's better not to see the bride before getting married. It's inauspicious," Ling Yamo said helplessly with dark eyes. "Besides, Madam spent a whole day dressing you up. She even let you sleep with your clothes on tonight. If you take off your clothes like this, you will definitely reveal your flaws tomorrow." Ling Li's eyes darkened. He hesitated for a moment and finally let go of the black clothes. He didn't know whether it was the former sentence or the latter sentence that moved him. Seeing Ling Li give up, Ling Imo couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and immediately put away the black clothes. Ling Imo, do you think Su Li really wants to marry me? Master, you asked the wrong person. If you want to know, isn't it better to ask Madam in person tomorrow? Madam? Ling Li laughed at himself. He turned around and lay down with his eyes closed. Regardless of whether he slept or not, the night would eventually pass. It was the 5th day of March. It was a good day to get married. The whole Yunjing city was bustling early in the morning. The street in front of the Ling mansion was crowded. If the government didn't maintain the order, even the sedan chair for the bride could not go out. People could hear the discussion everywhere in the street. Everyone knew that the first beauty in Yunjing City was going to marry the first playboy in Yunjing City today. When the imperial edict was just issued, almost all the young talents in Yunjing City beat their chests and stamped their feet. They were so angry that they almost wanted to go to the Ling mansion and kill the good-for-nothing. But the imperial edict issued the marriage. Even if they had 100 guts, they didn't dare to destroy the wedding banquet. After several days of preparation, the marriage between Lord Rui's mansion and the Ling family had become the topic of conversation in the whole Yunjing city. It was not strange that there were so many people on the wedding day. Chapter 268. In front of the gate of Lord Rui's mansion, the wedding procession stopped slowly under the gaze of many people. The maids who were watching at the gate immediately dispersed. They're here, they're finally here. Mammy Li was also dressed in red today. She had been with Su Li all the time. Now that Su Li was getting married, she would accompany her and take care of Su Li's daily life. Seeing the handsome young man sitting on the horse, Mammy Li was overjoyed. She knew some details about Ling Li. At this moment, she couldn't help but secretly rejoice for Su Li that she found such a powerful husband. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Ling Li was carried down from the special seat of the horse by Ling Imo and put on the wheelchair. He was more nervous and excited. He took a deep breath and barely kept calm. He rocked the wheelchair alone and entered Lord Rui's mansion. He came to the door of Su Li's courtyard unimpeded. Ling Li was surprised. He had also attended many weddings of big families in Yunjing City. The bridegroom would encounter a lot of difficulties when he came to marry the bride, but he didn't encounter many obstacles. Did Lord Rui treat him differently because of the imperial edict? Or, at this moment, suddenly, a horrible strong wind swept behind him. Ling Li's pupils shrank and countless thoughts flashed in his mind. Finally, his tense body suddenly relaxed and he didn't intend to resist. Hum! With a cold hum, the strong wind suddenly disappeared when it approached Ling Li's back. Ling Li narrowed his eyes slightly. The strength dissipated so easily. This person didn't intend to hurt him at all. Was it a test? Ling Li pretended to be confused and looked back. But when he saw the face of the person behind him, the confusion on his face instantly turned into astonishment. The person was dressed as a servant. He looked young and didn't seem to be 18 or 19 years old. He looked cold and quite similar to Ling Imo. But compared with Ling Imo, the expression on his face was much more complicated. Are you Fang Yuan? Ling Li found out the name of this person in his mind. Then he noticed that the latter's pneuma was as obscure as the abyss. He was suddenly shocked. He still remembered that when he met Fang Yuan in the Desa town, he hadn't even broken through the inborn hurdle. Now he had the cultivation above the inborn 6th hurdle. It was just over a year. Such a span was really exaggerated. Thinking of Su Li's rapid progress in these years, he suddenly realized that Fang Yuan had been with Su Li all the time. Child Ling, with your intelligence, it is not difficult to guess my purpose today. Fang Yuan's face was cold and his tone was full of killing intent. He said, "You have hurt her once. If you dare to hurt her in the future, I will exhaust all my knowledge and kill you even if I chase you to the ends of the earth." Ling Li raised his eyebrows slightly. He seemed to be relaxed, but his heart was slightly heavy. He saw from Fang Yuan's eyes. Because he saw the same thing from Fang Yuan's eyes. For Su's heart, of Li, Ling Ri Ling, King of Ling of Ling Li's Fang. Thinking of this, Ling Li took a slight breath and exhaled the cold air in his body. It seemed that Ling Li's anxiety and irritation in the past 3 days were gone. In front of Fang Yuan, he finally recovered some calmness as a hierarch of a great sect. I never want to hurt her. If you come here just to warn me, then you can get out of the way. Fang Yuan frowned, but he was reluctant to get out of the way. His beloved woman was behind the door. She would marry the man in front of him today. If he could, he would rather stand here all his life and never give way. However, everything that was happening right now was her idea. Fang Yuan was a little bitter. After his family was ruined, he wandered from place to place with his sister. He thought that he had suffered all kinds of hardships in the world. But today he knew that there was another kind of bitterness. It was extremely bitter and more unbearable than all the previous ones. Remember what I said. Fang Yuan finally got out of the way. Ling Li took a deep look at Fang Yuan, whose eyes were as sharp as a blade. Then he entered the yard in his wheelchair. In the new yard, Su Li wore a red veil and sat quietly at the stone table. Mammy Li had come to the yard in advance and waited for Su Li. She was very happy. Originally, the bride was supposed to wait in the room, but the miss said that she didn't want to. Finally, she waited in the yard. The emperor's marriage was a symbol of destiny. At the moment, time was tight, so many rules were omitted. So, this rule was not a big deal. After a while, the sound of the wheelchair came into their ears. Mammy Li's face immediately brightened. She came forward and said happily, "Child, you are finally here." Ling Li saw that Su Li was sitting in the yard, and he couldn't help but be astonished. In this way, she probably heard every word of the voice outside the yard. Mammy Li didn't notice Ling Li's reaction. She walked to the back of the wheelchair and pushed Ling Li to Su Li. She said, "Child, don't be in a daze. You should take the miss out. Don't delay the time." Mammy Li took the red ribbon and stuffed one end into Su Li's hands. Then she handed the other end to Ling Li. Ling Li immediately reacted. He clenched the red ribbon that was connected with Su Li and nodded, "Mammy, you are right. Let's go out." "Okay." Mammy Li promised with a smile. She helped Ling Li push the wheelchair to the gate. But she laughed in her heart. Child Ling, who was so high-spirited in the yard in the valley, was so nervous today. He didn't even know how to speak. It was really interesting. When they came out of the yard again, Ling Li didn't see Fang Yuan again. He clenched the red ribbon in his hand and turned his head. His eyes never left Su Li. Although he couldn't see Su Li's face, he knew that it was Su Li just by looking at her figure. Today, Su Li was not as fierce and crazy as she was in the osmanthus forest that day. She walked lightly and followed the wheelchair step by step. She seemed quiet and gentle. In a trance, Ling Li returned to the days when he and Su Li traveled together in Yunjing. They only envied the mandarin ducks but not the immortals. Unfortunately, those days had been fragmented with the disaster. A group of 3 people walked to the gate of Lord Rue's mansion. The people who had been waiting immediately became noisy. The noise was endless. "Come out! Come out! Princess Li is coming. Princess Li must be dressed very beautifully. It's a pity that the playboy of the Ling family got lucky. We have no chance to see her. Hateful, hateful. How could Ling Li be so lucky? I really envy him." Dongfang Rue saw the 3 people coming out. When he saw Ling Li's appearance, he couldn't help but feel relieved. He could see that Ling Li really liked his daughter. At least, Li would not be wronged if she joined the Ling mansion. After Su Li got into the sedan chair, the MC of the Ministry of Rites shouted, "Start the sedan chair." The wedding procession set off to go back. The people who were watching followed the wedding procession. The whole street was moving with them. Soon, the gate of Lord Rue's mansion became deserted. Dongfang Rui was full of complex feelings. He took a long breath and said, "Let's go." "Yes, master." Wu Bin secretly wiped away his tears and felt sorry for his master. Just because of an imperial edict, Miss had to marry into such a shady marriage. Master must be very sad in his heart. After 2 hours, the wedding procession was like a long dragon. It finally stopped in front of the Ling mansion. When Ling Li turned his wheelchair and stopped in front of the sedan chair, The MC of the Ministry of Rites immediately shouted, "Start the sedan chair." The bride and groom get up. Bow. Ling Li immediately cupped his hands to the sedan chair and looked attentive. Mammy Li looked solemn, but her eyes were sparkling with joy. Mammy Li lifted the curtain of the sedan chair and let Su Li come out. Then she handed the red ribbon to Su Li again. The bride and groom, go straight to the front of the flower hall. Burn incense. Kneel down. Kowtow once, twice, and thrice. The MC's voice continued. After they burned incense, they went through a series of complicated rules. Finally, they came to the main hall of the Ling mansion. At a glance, Ling Li saw his grandma Ms. Gu sitting on the right side. She smiled so much that the wrinkles on her face gathered together. On the left side, Dong Feng Rui looked sad and happy. Chiu Meng and Ling Ping stood beside Ms. Gu. There was joy in Ling Ping's eyes, but he was still calm. Chiu Meng had already burst into tears and cried. Bow to heaven and earth. The MC's voice was long. Ling Li turned his wheelchair and turned his back to the hall. He hesitated for a moment and wanted to get down from the wheelchair. People in the Ling mansion saw this scene, and they immediately changed their expressions. Even the whispers among the audience became smaller. In a blink of an eye, the hall was silent. What's wrong with Li? He's ill. He can bow from afar. Why does he get down? Chiu Meng was anxious and wanted to go forward, but she was stopped by Ling Ping. Mother, I think Brother Li just doesn't want to have any regrets. Let him go. Even if he falls, he is willing. If you help him, Brother Li will feel uncomfortable. Chiu Meng's heart was twisted. She said, silly boy, why didn't he tell me anything? Even if I prepared a crutch for him, it would be much better than now. Ling Qinglan, who was also in the audience seat, saw this scene and couldn't help but shake his head slightly. Ling Li clearly knew that the deeper he fell in love, the more painful he would be in the future, but he didn't mean to give up. People who fell in love were difficult to understand, at least he couldn't understand. Thinking of this, Ling Qinglan's lips moved slightly, and a sound was transmitted to Ling Li. To ensure that there is no mistake, you sealed your tendons and meridians yesterday. Now your legs are really useless. If you want to kneel down from the wheelchair without exposing your cultivation, you will be embarrassed a lot. It's better to forget it. Ling Li lowered his head and gritted his teeth. He tried to prop up his upper body without any pause. Ling Qinglan frowned. His voice was clearly transmitted to Ling Li, but Ling Li didn't seem to hear it at all. Ling Li moved too slowly. Gradually, there were whispers among the people who watched the ceremony. What's going on? How can he marry Su Li? What a shame. I can't stand it. Hush, keep your voice down. Ling Li heard every word. His face was slightly gloomy. Every word was like a knife stabbing his heart. He began to speed up. It didn't matter that he lost face, but he didn't want Su Li to be laughed at with him. However, it was difficult for a person whose cultivation and strength were sealed to get down from the wheelchair with only his hands. As expected, Ling Li's hands suddenly lost balance before long. Chapter 269. There was a loud noise. The wheelchair fell to the ground, and Ling Li also fell from it. The maids were so scared that they covered their eyes. Many kind-hearted onlookers also turned their heads and couldn't bear to see it. Just at this moment, a pair of seemingly delicate hands suddenly appeared and held Ling Li's waist tightly, making him kneel on the ground steadily. Maybe because of the big movement, the red veil slipped off. Su Li's beautiful face was immediately seen by everyone, which made them exclaim in amazement. What a beautiful girl! Princess Li is really a beauty. I really envy the third master of the Ling family. There was a lot of discussion in the hall. In the blink of an eye, the scandal of Ling Li was overshadowed. Ling Li stared at Su Li. It seemed that time was stagnant when they looked at each other. Wow! Another burst of exclamation pulled Ling Li back to reality. It turned out that the onlookers looked back and set off a small climax. Chiu Meng saw the scene in the hall and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at Su Li more kindly than before and even a little more grateful. Su Li's master was the imperial preceptor. Her cultivation was also among the best among many misses in Yunjing City. It was said that she had acquired the 8th hurdle. Although she had never seen Su Li's skills, if she only helped Ling Li to stabilize his body, the red veil on her head would not fall off. This girl did it on purpose to help Ling Li out of trouble. Mrs. Gu looked more sincere with a faint smile on her face. She looked at Su Li very kindly and said, "It's a blessing of our Ling family that you can help my grandson so unobtrusively. You are so considerate." When Mammy Li picked up the red veil and covered Su Li's face again, the 3 bows could finally continue without any hindrance. Second, bow to your parents. Husband and wife bow to each other. The ceremony is finished. Send them to the bridal chamber. With the MC's last words, Dongfang Rui and Ms. Gu both breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. The old and the young looked at each other for a moment and smiled. Both of them had unknown meanings. Chiu Meng burst into tears. She leaned against Ling Ping, crying and laughing. She murmured, "Great, great. Li finally has a family. It's great." After Mammy Li led Su Li out of the main hall, the banquet began. The banquet spread from the courtyard of the main hall to both sides of the street outside the Ling mansion, attracting a large number of ordinary people to come to the banquet. It could be said that on this day, because of the marriage between the Ling mansion and the Lord Rui's mansion, almost half of Yunjing City was lively. Ling Li sat back in the wheelchair with the help of Ling Imo. As soon as he came out of the seats in the inner hall, he was surrounded by a group of young talents. "Young royal prince, let me toast you." "Congratulations, young royal prince, for winning the beauty. Come, young royal prince, today is your big day, so you can't refuse wine." Ling Li smiled and drank the wine without saying anything. Others thought he was really happy. Only Ling Imo, who was beside the wheelchair, knew that he was not as happy as he looked at the moment. "Alright, the young royal prince is indeed straightforward. Here's another toast to you." Ling Li almost didn't refuse anyone. He sealed his cultivation, and soon he was drunk. His eyes were hazy. Ling Imo looked at him and wanted to help him drink. At this moment, there was a burst of hearty laughter outside the courtyard. "Haha, it's so lively." Many civil and military officials who were familiar with the voice immediately changed their expressions. They put down the wine and dishes in their hands, came to the gate, and knelt down. "Welcome, Your Majesty. Welcome, Your Majesty. Long live the Emperor." Dongfang Rui and others at the main table in the hall changed their expressions slightly. They immediately came out and happened to meet Dongfang Xiao, who just came in from the gate. Mrs. Gu narrowed her eyes slightly and returned to normal in an instant. She walked over with her crutch and was about to salute, saying, "Your Majesty." Dongfang Xiao quickly held Mrs. Gu and smiled hypocritically, "You are so polite. I'm really flattered." Mrs. Gu raised her eyebrows and pretended to sigh, "It's rare that Your Majesty can call me sister-in-law." Dongfang Xiao became serious and said solemnly, "Eldest brother, I will never forget your kindness in those years. Now you and I are old and many people have passed away. If I don't get close to you, who else can I talk to?" Dongfang Xiao's words seemed to be sincere, which made many guests feel sentimental. It turned out that the emperor had such a relationship with the Ling family. It was not easy for the emperor to keep his original intention after so many years. Mrs. Gu's expression was not very good at the moment. She could only force a smile and said, "Your Majesty, you are busy with state affairs. This time, you not only arrange a marriage for my grandson, but also attend the wedding banquet in person. I'm really honored. Please sit in the inner hall." Dongfang Xiao squinted and nodded, "Okay." Ling Ping followed at the end with a respectful look, but a cold light flashed in his eyes from time to time. Dongfang Xiao really deserved to be the emperor for decades. He was eloquent, but he didn't come to pay homage to his grandfather in these years. After a group of people entered the house, the courtyard became boisterous again, and it became more boisterous than before. Many people were talking about various things that the Ling family fought for the Dahan country in those years. Some people even whispered and talked about the secrets of those years. I heard that back then His Majesty and old General Ling became sworn brothers, and the two brothers worked together to conquer this great land. His Majesty originally had the status of a powerful family, and it was only because old General Ling purposely gave way that the position of emperor fell to His Majesty. Later, old General Ling got married and established a career. Like father, like son, General Ling also made great achievements for the Han country. Your Majesty promised the title of Lord of North to General Ling plus the legend of Mrs. Ling. General Ling's mansion was respected. The old people chatted in private, but the young people still surrounded Ling Li to toast. At this moment, Ling Li was extremely drunk. If he didn't sit in a wheelchair and was accompanied by Ling Mo, he would have been lying on the table. Among this group of people, the young man who made the most effort to toast saw this scene. He felt it was enough and made a gesture. Not long after, a young girl with a graceful figure leisurely walked over. Many young geniuses were stunned when they saw her. Wasn't she the miss of General Wu's mansion, Wu Xiuxiu? She was almost molested by Ling Li in those years. She should avoid the Ling mansion. Why did she appear here? Ling Mo was shocked and felt that something was wrong. But it was too late for him to stop her. Wu Xiuxiu was anxious to obey Dongfang Zhao's order. She showed a hint of bitterness on her face. Her soft words made many child's hearts flutter. Although Wu Xiuxiu's appearance was not as good as that of Su Li, the fairy in the human world, her charm was not possessed by ordinary women. Child Ling, I haven't seen you for a long time. I didn't expect that you were going to get married. Ling Li put down the glass and turned his head. There was a trace of doubt on his flushed face. He stammered, Who are you? As soon as he said this, people around immediately burst into laughter. They thought that Wu Xiuxiu's appearance could make Ling Li, who was lustful, embarrassed. Unexpectedly, it was Wu Xiuxiu who was embarrassed instead of Ling Li. Wu Xiuxiu was so angry that she wanted to leave. But when she thought of Dongfang Zhao's order, she had to bear it. She continued to test, Ling Li, don't you even know me? I've seen a lot of men like you eating from the bowl while looking at the pot. If I'm willing to be your second wife, won't you agree? Even Wu Xiuxiu felt that her face was burning when she said such shameless words. If it weren't for her family, she wouldn't come here to say these disgusting words to this good-for-nothing. Others didn't know what she was thinking. But after her words, more people gathered around to watch. Miss Wu thinks highly of herself. I didn't expect that she could say such words. It's really an eye-opener for me. I think Miss Wu just comes to test Ling Li because of jealousy. She wants to make Princess Li embarrassed. If Ling Li really covets her, then Princess Li... Ling Li is lustful. I don't think it's possible. Princess Li will be humiliated before they consummate their marriage. Wu Xiuxiu snorted and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She waited for Ling Li to show his embarrassment. She specially dressed up in order to seduce Ling Li. At this moment, Ling Li was drunk. Even if he was sober, he would have an impulse. Ling Mo stood beside the wheelchair and was expressionless like a block of wood. He didn't mean to stop her at all. He had already seen the purpose of Wu Xiuxiu's coming. No matter whether there was someone behind her, what he wanted to know was whether Ling Li was sincere in this marriage. If it was sincere, there was no flaw. Even if someone wanted to make a fuss about the marriage, there was no breakthrough. If not, thinking of this, Ling Mo smiled slightly. Ling Li suddenly stared. It seemed that his reverse scale was touched. His red face was full of anger. He directly smashed the wine glass in his hand. He pointed at Wu Xiuxiu's nose and scolded, Where do you come from? Get out of here. The whole scene suddenly became quiet. No one expected that Ling Li would suddenly get angry. Wu Xiuxiu was even more stunned by the sudden scolding. Before she responded, Ling Li suddenly retracted his hand and hammered his chest fiercely. He shouted, I only love Su Li in my life and will only marry her. Since God allows me to marry her, I will never touch any other woman in my life. If I break this oath, I will be struck by lightning. Who do you think you are? You can't even compare with Su Li. Do you want me to marry you? Wu Xiuxiu was at a loss for a moment. She didn't expect that Ling Li would react like this. Ha! After a moment of silence, someone finally couldn't help laughing. Wu Xiuxiu's eyes suddenly turned red. She didn't remember Dongfang Zhao's order in her mind. She cried and ran all the way out of the Ling mansion. There was a smile on Ling Mo's indifferent face. He persuaded helplessly, "Master, you can't drink anymore. It's almost time. You have to consummate your marriage in the evening. Young masters, please excuse me." Chapter 270. After 5 minutes, Ling Mo pushed the wheelchair into the east courtyard. The noise of the main hall courtyard came from far away, which made the east courtyard particularly quiet. Ling Mo looked around and didn't find anyone except the hidden guards of the Yinma cult. He reached out to draw out the silver needles from Ling Li's waist, but a hand suddenly stopped him at this moment. Ling Mo was stunned. "Master, aren't you drunk?" Ling Li, who was drunk and unconscious, slowly raised his head. Although his face was still red, his eyes were clear. He said slowly, "Dongfang Zhao suddenly arranged a marriage. There are a lot of tricks in it. How can I not prepare a little bit? Even if I seal my cultivation, it is not so easy to get drunk." Then, Ling Li looked at the brightly lit bridal chamber in the courtyard and glanced at Ling Mo, who was still standing aside. Ling Mo immediately understood and left the courtyard. Seeing Ling Li push the door open and turn the wheelchair to go in, Ling Mo sighed in his heart and turned around to disappear into the night. Ling Li gently closed the door and pulled out the silver needles from his waist. The genuine energy in his body ran, and he looked up at the room. The red candles were swaying and the light made it a little warm. In the translucent curtain, Su Li with a red veil sat on the edge of the bed with a red wedding quilt. She looked very cute. This was the wedding night of him and Su Li. Ling Li's throat rolled. He pushed the wheelchair and stood up. After hesitating for a moment, he opened the curtain and sat beside Su Li. He picked up the wedding scale on the table and was about to lift the red veil. At the moment when he was about to lift it, the red veil suddenly slipped off and floated to the ground. Ling Li stared at the red silk blankly. When he raised his head, he saw a cold face. The cold eyes almost chilled him to the bone. Even the fiery red lips seemed to be frozen, and he couldn't feel any warmth. Dong! The wedding scale fell to the ground. Ling Li was full of bitterness. Ling Li, pay attention to your address." Su Li's eyes were extremely cold. She interrupted Ling Li's words. "Do you still naively think that I will marry you sincerely? The revenge of my aunt is absolutely irreconcilable. If it is not for the overall situation, do you think I will let you go?" Ling Li's heart ached. His face was slightly pale and his eyes were deep. He couldn't say a word for a long time. Su Li forcibly suppressed the discomfort in her heart and then sneered, "Yes, I used you this time to protect Lord Rui's mansion. I will call you husband in front of others in the future." As for others, at this point, Ling Li suddenly caught a glimpse of a shadow outside the door. His eyes immediately changed. He directly held Su Li's waist and lay on the bed. The curtains on both sides fell. At the same time, outside the door, Ling Liui and others squatted in the corner, listening attentively. They stared at the room that was still lit, and the sound transmission was extremely complicated. "How? Did you hear anything?" Ling Ling said. "Ling Fli, courtyard." Ling, courtyard. Ling Liui's face changed slightly, and he immediately took people to slip away. When he was about to climb over the wall, he turned back unconsciously and happened to see Ling Mo among a group of maids and servants. Ling Liui was eavesdropping by the window as they did just now. Ling Liui held back his laughter and immediately climbed over the wall. He didn't expect that Ling Li, who had always been insensitive, would gossip like them. In the bed covered by the curtain, Ling Li covered Su Li's mouth with one hand. He listened to the movement outside the room quietly, but he didn't find that his whole body was on Su Li's. Su Li's eyes widened slightly. She was ashamed and annoyed. She pushed Ling Li away. Ling Li didn't stop and hit the wall directly, making a clear sound. A group of maids and servants outside immediately became restless. I heard it. What a loud sound." Ling Mo straightened up and looked strange. The sound just now seemed to be that someone hit the wall. Did Su Li fight with the master? Hiss! Ling Li shook his head and sat up from the bed. Su Li felt distressed. She stretched out her hand and woke up in the middle. Then she retracted her hand quickly. Her face was cold again. "You are really cruel." Ling Li smiled bitterly and rubbed his head. He lowered his voice and said, "There are people peeping outside. At least we need to pretend." Su Li snorted and turned her head away. She curled up in the corner of the quilt and lay down. After a long time, she said faintly, "You cannot get out of bed, but don't touch me." Ling Li was a little relieved. He carefully lifted the other end of the quilt, but found that there were red dates and lotus seeds and other things under the quilt. It was so hard that it bumped against his body. He shook his head helplessly and lay directly on the quilt. The room suddenly became quiet, and only their breathing could be heard. After a long time, Ling Li opened his eyes in the quiet room. He turned his head and saw Su Li's black hair bun. He smelled the delicate fragrance of a virgin. He hesitated for a moment and ran the genuine energy to move his body inch by inch. He didn't stop until he was about to touch Su Li. The fragrance was more intense. Ling Li raised his slender hand and wanted to touch Su Li's hair, which was like a waterfall on the quilt. But he stopped at last, for fear that he would wake her up and she would be angry again. Thinking of this, Ling Li's eyes were gentle. He was ready to watch Su Li and wait for the morning quietly while listening to her regular breath. If he could stay with her like this in this life, even if she was serious to him or even hated him, he would be satisfied. The night was destined to be long. Ling Li suddenly remembered what Su Li said before. She was willing to marry him in order to protect the Lord Rui's mansion. Although Dongfang Xiao was no longer afraid of the Ling family in these years, he was determined not to let the Ling family and the Lord Rui's mansion cooperate and grow. Something must have happened. He quickly thought of the recent rumors about Ma Jintian and realized that Dongfang Xiao's first choice should be Ma Jintian. In this way, Su Li almost gave herself to Ma Jintian? Ling Li's eyes flashed with anger. Just thinking about it made him angry. It took him a long time to calm down. When Ling Li was thinking about it, he didn't find that Su Li suddenly opened her eyes for a moment. She felt his breath rising and falling on her neck. Her eyes flashed, but she did nothing and closed her eyes again. It was a silent night. In the morning of the next day, Su Li opened her eyes and sat up. She was still dressed neatly. She frowned slightly and looked back at Ling Li, who was still sleeping. Her eyes flashed a little. She hesitated for a moment and untied her clothes and threw them on the ground. Then she got out of bed and opened the kitchen door to see what she could wear. Fortunately, the Ling residence was well prepared. Half of the wardrobes in the bridal chamber were filled with women's clothing, all prepared for her. She casually picked a light yellow dress and wore it. Then, she combed her hair into a bun. Only then did a group of maids arrive with the toiletries. The head maid was quite clever. She saw that the curtain had been lifted. She couldn't help but look to the side in confusion. She saw the beautiful woman sitting in the dressing room without any makeup. She opened her lips slightly and hurriedly walked over. She bowed her head and said nervously, "Mistress, you get up so early. I'm here to help you and the master to wash and change clothes." Su Li slightly pursed her red lips and rolled her starry eyes. The little maid's heart was pounding. They all stayed with Madame Chiomeng before. They were specially selected by Madame to serve the mistress. In the future, the princess in front of them would be their master. How could they not be nervous? Su Li was so clever that she quickly figured out the origin of these maids. She smiled slightly and ordered, "Put them down. I will serve my husband personally. You can leave." The maids didn't dare to disobey. They quickly put down everything and left the door. It is said that the mistress is gentle and virtuous. I didn't expect that she is so overbearing. However, young master is very fortunate to have young mistress protecting him like this. The maids whispered to each other, but the scene in the room was different. After Su Li washed slowly, Ling Li, slowly, woke up. He pretended to be confused and sat up. Looking at the messy clothes on the ground, if he hadn't slept at all yesterday, he would have thought that he and Su Li had consummated their marriage. He wore a white shirt and got out of bed. Seeing Su Li in a light yellow dress, his face was slightly hot. He didn't sleep at all in the morning. Naturally, he saw the whole process of Su Li changing clothes. After taking off the red wedding robe and gauze, there was only the belly band left. Hurry up and wash and change clothes. It's time to serve tea. Hearing Su Li's voice, Ling Li immediately woke up. He quickly went to the table to wash and took out a black robe from the wardrobe to put it on. But when it came to tie his hair, he was embarrassed. There were laws in the Han country. The style of a man's hair was completely different before and after marriage. But he only knew this rule. He didn't know the specific style and how to tie his hair. For a moment, Ling Li sat in front of the bronze mirror and looked at himself with disheveled hair. He sighed and didn't do anything. He never thought that one day he would be puzzled by a simple hairstyle. Su Li sat at the round table and waited. Seeing that there was no movement in the inner room for a long time, she got up and walked a few steps lightly. Then she saw Ling Li with soft black hair. His eyes were melancholy, which made him handsome. A trace of softness flashed in her eyes. She walked over quietly, grabbed the comb in Ling Li's hand with her right hand and combed it gently. Ling Li was stunned immediately. Li, don't get me wrong. Su Li didn't raise her head and said faintly, I just do it for myself. At least before the decline of the Dongfang family, you and I can't show any flaws. Ling Li was silent. Although Su Li reminded him of the relationship between them all the time, he couldn't calm down now that Su Li was beside him and helped him tie his hair on the first day of their marriage. Well, let's go out. Su Li adjusted Ling Li's lapel and turned around to push the wheelchair over. When Ling Li saw his appearance in the mirror, he couldn't help but be stunned. It turned out that the ordinary hair could be so beautiful. Su Li's hairstyle seemed to be designed for him. It set off his face perfectly. In addition, there was a wisp of green in the bun. It was really a perfect masterpiece. Li's movements are so skillful. She is faster than me. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.